Hello everyone and welcome to this video in which we will be taking the channel back to its roots a little bit, and that is gameplay commentary. So this video is a gameplay commentary style video in which you will find a level 12 or above dungeon played on each of the healing classes. Use the timestamps below to navigate to the healer for which you would like to see the gameplay commentary, or if you're like me and you like all the healers, feel free to watch the video in its entirety. Also, please let me know in the comments what you think about this kind of format. I don't want to flood the channel with gameplay commentary. That's not supposed to be the core content, but I think like maybe once, twice or 3 times per season we can have sort of an aggregated video like this one, so that the concepts we discuss in the other videos on the channel find a real life application here. And with all of that being said, now please enjoy the video. Alright, welcome to this section of the video, which is about my Mistweaver Monk, specifically played in a level 13 Mysara Caverns dungeon. Many of you have requested or suggested that I be looking into dropping the Apex talents in Spirit Font and instead going for additional capstones for empowered Rising Sun Kicks via Jadefire Stomp, empowered Spinning Crane Kick, and the 2 charges of empowered abilities via using your Thunder Focus Tea. And I have, and it's insane. I can't overstate enough how powerful this feels. Now this first pull in Mysara's Caverns, Bloodlust pull, is usually somewhat challenging. It's not the worst, to be honest, but on my Monk, I feel like I don't really have to do very much. I go in, I use Spinning Crane Kick, I consume my Thunder Focus Tea, I use my charges of Rising Sun Kick, and the background healing generated by this relatively simple rotation, you can see 142k HPS, is overwhelming. Surely Monk struggles with other healing profiles more, but yeah, generally you do get here a lot of HPS from a relatively simple rotation, especially on these big pulls. Here I can also leech some additional healing of the training dummies, which is always nice, and the DPS also appreciate the opportunity for some extra damage padding. Yeah, all of that is not to say that I think that the Apex talents are a bad choice. I'm a bit on the fence about what's going to come out on top in the end. I think the Apex talents allow for a little bit more of directional control, because you can sort of more freely decide when you are going to consume the Spirit Font for the extra soothing mist channeled healing. Whereas in this iteration, yeah, you sort of consume your Thunder Focus Tea on cooldown. Sure, you can hold the charges for a while, because Thunder Focus Tea, in contrast to an ability like Stasis, for example, immediately starts its cooldown when it is pressed. For Stasis, you have to wait until you have put all of the spells into the Stasis and used it, and then the cooldown will start. That's not the case here. So if you press Thunder Focus Tea, the cooldown will start immediately, regardless of whether you have consumed the Empower spells or not. So you can hold them a little bit, and you can play around that a little bit. But then again, you can't really press any of the other buttons. So if you want to hold your Rising Sun Kick for additional healing after having pressed Thunder Focus Tea, you can't really use Renewing Mist, because that will also be empowered then, and you may not want to empower that one. So yeah, it's a little bit more tricky. So the control you have over the sort of the when the healing is happening in this specialization or this setup of the talent tree is a little bit lower. But that's probably not coming into play at this key level just yet, and that's also not to say that the Spirit Font specialization setup will be better in the end. I don't know. I don't know which one will be better, but this one certainly is a lot of fun, and yeah, I feel like in most situations, from my experience, and my experience on Mistweaver is a little bit limited to be fair, keeping the spinning going is usually the right choice. There's an absolutely insane amount of background healing you do by just pressing your Spinning Crane Kick and then consuming your Rising Sun Kicks on cooldown. And occasionally, if you have a tank who takes a little bit more damage, then you can put your Enveloping Mists on the tank to sort of help him out a little bit with the healing. However, I often find, and I even have a little bit of guilty feelings about this, that if I'm in a big pack and I'm just spinning all the time, I feel like I should use a different global other than the spinning global. But every time I do, I'm not quite sure if it's worth it, or if I should instead just have kept spinning. Sure, you want to consume your Rising Sun kicks because they do a lot of healing. They also spread your renewing mists. But other than that, I think just pressing spinning crane kick a lot has served me well so far. I don't have the 4-set yet, so I also have to be a little bit more cognizant of spreading my renewing mist myself, because with the 4-set you would get an additional renewing mist spread every time you use Thunder Focus Tea, but unfortunately I don't have that yet. But I think that will also go a long way to enhancing the smoothness of the specialization even further, because these manual applications of renewing mist that I'm doing right now feel a little bit out of place with the specialization, and I'm not quite sure how it plays out in the end when you do have the 4-set, if that is almost entirely gone or if you still have to do that ever so often. Not quite sure, but also using Rising Sun Kick on cooldown goes a long way in helping with that as well. As far as the dungeon goes we are playing, so far this hasn't been really challenging. Also due to the crazy background healing you are generating as a Mistweaver Monk. One challenge, if you're not playing in a group where you are on comps together and so on, is that I have the feeling that the tanks get so used to this crazy background healing they are receiving all the time that as soon as you use some other globals, you are like, okay, let me apply some renewing mists to the team. At this point, and this background healing stops for a moment, then they may have gotten a little bit slacking with their mitigations and so on, and they will suddenly drop really hard. So that's what I've seen in multiple keys already, which kind of surprised me. So if you play Monk, you have to be a little bit careful that when you stop spinning and stop using your punching abilities, then things can go wrong relatively quickly. That's not the case here though. So far this has been going well, but that's about to change almost immediately, because I remember this pull and this one is not going well. We go pull these bears and the bird onto this pack, and then you could see it here for a second. The DK grips in these little masks on top here. There it is. The DK grips all of the warding masks into the pack, and they, as innocent as they may look, and der Hausmeister, means the janitor, DK, probably thought this would be some nice additional damage for him. But it's not. It's nice additional damage for us, and we are getting absolutely destroyed. I try to save by immediately using Revival, but it's to no avail. Tank also procs immediately. My life cocoon was a bit late there. But at this point the pull is already done, I suppose. Tank goes a little bit enraged here. I probably should have stopped healing immediately. I sort of try to recover, but that's probably the wrong choice, I would say. Just stop healing immediately to reset and be able to still finish out the key, which from the way that it has been going up to this point, we are on very good pace for making the key, even with this wipe. It doesn't seem as though the key is bricked already. Yeah, it's those kinds of situations can be a little bit frustrating, where some DPS at the behest of dealing more damage simply make pulls much more risky than they need to be, especially with these warding masks. I'm not exactly sure what they do. I think they do some sort of fire damage to multiple players. Completely unnecessary. Maybe it was not on purpose, but it did feel like he wanted to grip them in. And generally I am an advocate of playing keys safe as long as you can play them safe. At the point where you can't finish them anymore if you don't play them safe, because the damage is not sufficient, so you need to pull big in order to be able to finish them, then yes, I agree. then big pulls need to happen. But other than that, I think people underestimate, especially tanks, I think, from my experience, underestimate how much is possible in the sense of timing a key and playing it cleanly without making some giga pulls. Yeah, so very often you will find that the pulls are much much bigger than they need to be, and that's not something that I generally agree with. And you can see this pack is challenging in and of itself, even without the masks added to it. But again, using Spinning Crane Kick a lot, and then sort of I like to hold my cooldowns until I get to a point, except for Thunder Focus Tea, that one I just use on cooldown. My other cooldowns I like to hold until a point where I feel like, okay, things are starting to slightly destabilize. And so for example, the tank takes a lot of damage, then maybe use GG and use an instant cast Enveloping Mists on the tank, or use Conduit of the Celestials, or in the worst situation, use Life Cocoon. Anyway, Life Cocoon is a spell that, yeah, it's very, very powerful. It feels like a 5-minute cooldown external. But it's really not. It has a very, very low cooldown, so I think using it frequently and not being too stingy with it is an important optimization point for playing Mistweaver Monk. And yeah, we get into the first boss here. We don't lust it, I don't believe, which we should have actually. It's just better to lust here, even if it's in the middle of the pull, than lusting at a later point. I like to I sort of view this fight in two phases. One is the tank healing phase, which is the one we are in right now, where the Moro Jin throws his flanking spear on the tank. I like to put Enveloping Mist on the tank and sort of help him deal with this damage. And then as soon as the infected pinions go out from neck cracks, the group healing phase begins, where ideally, it's not the case right now, but ideally you want to focus less on the tank and start focusing on the group more. And yeah, but I think Monk is also relatively well suited here if you can maintain the uptime on the mobs to heal through this, because it's just big rotting AoE damage, which Monk excels at healing. It's more of the tank healing where perhaps it's a little bit weaker. And now here happens something strange. I've already looked at it because I was like, did I really make this mistake? Here goes the freezing traps. And you can see here is a freezing trap. My little gnome is here. And now I move forward. I don't move into the trap. At least maybe my little gnome has the hitbox of a Kultiran. And I move forward. But the trap was here and not here. So we may want to look at it again. Trap spawn. And I don't know if that's a bug or what. Or I don't move into the trap, I move forward. So I don't know. Anyway, I get trapped. I mentally prepare, okay, what can I do? I hammer my revival. I immediately die to the puddles on the ground. I get rest. Maybe I should have looked at this for a second more, but everyone was so low, I was like, okay, immediately accept the res and then deal with it. Maybe I could have immediately Conduit of the Celestials. Probably that would have been the play, right? 3 seconds. Just comes back off cooldown. Immediate press of Conduit of the Celestials would have saved the day here. But in this situation, I was not quick enough with my thinking to be able to do that. Anyway, we do have an additional res. Sort of orient myself here in the corner. And from here on out, it's then safe again. Yeah, not the cleanest, but I also struggle to see, except for the res accepting, but that was a difficult situation where I get rest inside the frontal cone where all of the pinion shots are directly in front of the boss. Yeah, that I forgive myself for not sort of mapping the exact position in which I'm going to get resurrected. And as far as the ice trap is concerned, I don't know why I got stunned. It's hard for me to say. Maybe someone who is watching can generate some insight, or if something like this happened to you as well, or if maybe I misunderstand the mechanic. But from my view, I was not inside the freezing trap. Now we do a Bloodlust pull here. I think it's a bit wasted. I think if we do a Bloodlust pull here, we should pull the mini-boss as well. I don't think the mini-boss adds that much of an additional challenge, from my experience anyway. Yeah, he knocks one player onto the altar, but usually that is being broken relatively quickly. And the value of Bloodlust is limited if you don't take the boss on it, because then you will have to play this high HP boss afterwards as well. But yeah, I don't want to contradict my previous point, of course, of pulling it safe is usually the right option, and I stand by that, so I don't think this is a big mistake pulling like this here, because obviously pulling bigger would also generate some additional risks, and we are still on time for being able to time this key, and this, at the end of the day, is what we are after, rather than yeah, putting up a new timing record and being much faster than anyone else. This boss, mini-boss, is usually quite easy. I'm not quite sure if this is also just a root. Can I dispel it with my movement speed buff? Not exactly sure what's it called. This one down here. I probably can, yeah, with my root dispel, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I should have tried that here. Yeah, but this mini boss is very easy compared to some other mini bosses we have seen in the game, for sure. Generally, this section of the dungeon offers little challenge, except for the exploding shields on the Grim Skirmishers. Our mage should probably spell steal them. I think that's a possibility. So ideally you want to break the shields one by one by spell stealing them, by dispelling them, so that they don't explode all at the same time. It's not that big of a problem in a plus 13 key, other than the fact that if you don't dispel them, you have to damage them down, which is a time loss. But it's usually not that big of a problem if they explode simultaneously, because it's not enough to one-shot. But on higher key levels, this will become a problem, and it will one-shot. And then, yeah, you really have to play around this mechanic. And I don't think it's a particularly enjoyable mechanic from a puck perspective. Yeah, it adds some strategic depth to the game, but strategic depth is not usually something that pucks fare with very well. And yeah, I would rather have some sort of other mechanics that require a little bit less coordination. But I can also see that, yeah, you want to have some mechanics that require coordination still in the game, and so in order so as to not overly simplify it. Anyway, this section of the dungeon is not particularly eventful. The mobs are not very difficult. You have to dodge some soul storms and kill these Grim Skirmishers. But all in all, very straightforward, especially as a monk, because these are many little mobs, and just using your spinning crane kick here will be enough to heal up the party against this moderate damage that these mobs are delivering. So I will skip ahead a bit to toward the next boss fight, because this is just more of the same. Really, yeah, I would really say this is one of the easiest trash areas that the current dungeon pool has on offer. And this might change at the high key levels, where the explosions must be timed and yeah, broken in sequence and so on. But on this level, especially since the Spirit Rend cast was nerfed, I mostly don't even bother anymore dispelling it, because it does so little damage that the global for dispelling it probably heals less than if I just use an additional spinning crane kick. So I don't dispel it unless it gets to like 3 stacks or so, as I almost get knocked here from one soulstorm into another. which would have been an unfortunate way to go. But yeah, also the damage in these packs is quite moderate. Saying that with 120k HPS, I don't know, but this is failure damage, I think. Mostly failure damage, because usually the damage here isn't as big. People are just not paying as much attention, including myself. Yeah, I also got hit by the Soulstorms. But yeah. And now comes the next boss. Challenging boss, I would say, from a healer's perspective. It got nerfed a bit, in the sense that you don't get any big ticking debuffs anymore when the souls the two spirits meet one another. But yeah, this one too, like the previous one, is sort of has two phases. The first one is the tank healing phase, which is this one, where there's a drained soul debuff on the tank. I like to put enveloping mist on the tank for it, and then sort of afterwards, when the spirits spawn, it switches into the group healing phase. And you can see here, I hold my Thunder Focus Tea for consumption when the adds meet one another, in order to be able to heal that off. Both adds exploded at the same time, which is something that ideally the group would like to avoid. This is also why the abilities from my Thunder Focus Tea felt a little bit less impactful here, because it had to heal against double the damage essentially. But the advantage of having them explode at the same time, if that can be healed, of course, is that you don't have to contend with any stray ghosts anymore at the end. Yeah. Here also funny point, the DK dice here, it's a bit of a hitbox thing, right? I'm not even looking at his character, he is up here. I mean, he could have dodged the unmake rather than putting his magic bubble up, but in any event, it's not the worst decision. And now he goes in on top here, and he gets one shot here, but the unmake was here, so I'm not exactly sure what killed him. But yeah, he died immediately, and we resurrect him, and then begins the necrotic convergence phase. The damage in this phase is relatively substantial, and especially it's a bit challenging because you have to move to avoid these orbs around you. And while this is quite easy, it becomes less easy if there's a lot of damage going on and you really have to think about the sequencing of your healing abilities. So as far as cooldowns go, it can make sense to hold a cooldown, probably revival, for this phase. That if you see that you cannot manage anymore, that the group is dropping too low, because it is after all ticking AoE group damage, you have revival available to deal with this damage. And yeah, again we have this phase, and yeah, from this point forward it's just rinse and repeat. I'm not exactly sure, I don't have the perfect strategy here yet. I feel like on a plus 13 I can still get away with just timing my Thunder Focus Tea with the explosions and using cooldowns as needed. But if it came to a higher level, I would probably start developing more strongly some solutions for when to use which cooldowns, which sequencing makes the most sense. So for example, it would probably make sense to use Life Cocoon early in the tank healing phase, so that he does not bleed into the tank healing does not bleed into the group healing phase. Then perhaps GG, because it is on a very low cooldown as well, in the Ghost intermission. And then you could sort of have a Conduit of the Celestials for the second Ghost intermission, and then Revival for the big intermission, and so on. So I like to plan out my cooldowns in such a way, as I lag here a little bit, like to plan out my cooldowns in such a way for these kinds of fights, but so far in this season I haven't felt like it was strictly necessary. That being said, I only played like 13s and 14s so far. I haven't really pushed any hierarchies, also a little bit due to the fact that my healers all have a very, very low item level. This monk is actually my healer with the best gear at 263, but still has some blue pieces. Simply because I play 6 healers, and while I have taken time off work now to do that, otherwise I could not have done that to begin with, it's still a lot of time that goes into the game for leveling and then equipping all of them. And before the Mythic Plus keys went live, I also was gone for multiple weekends and didn't have much time during the work week. So all of my all of my characters started the Mythic Plus season at 2:30 or something. And so that's why they also don't have a good backdrop of champion gear from the before season 1 started, because I didn't have the time to gather it next to leveling. But yeah, so I still feel like at these levels, this whole planning out the cooldowns, even at my relatively low item level, is not strictly as necessary, as the Warlock goes off the edge of the map from the Soulstorms. Maybe it would be good to like put down a safety teleport. That being said, I also haven't done that, and I also flew off the map once. I think it happened to me once, but it did happen. And now comes the fight that Blizzard has put into the game for the sole reason of triggering healers, which is this drums dude up there, as the DK gets hit again, because it's just annoying. The fact that he pulses this AoE damage while you are already running up. You always have in packs, you always have some stragglers which aren't there yet, and then it's also at the stairs. Then some people are still at the bottom of the stairs, some people are already on top of the stairs, and so on. It's just a little bit awkward to heal, especially at the higher key levels where the damage is also substantial. And then someone is not in range and you can't heal them yet because they aren't there. It's just a little bit annoying, I would say. This fight as well, like all the fights it seems in my Sara's Caverns, also has a tank healing phase, which is the first one where the tank gets clobbered with the Spirit Breaker, and then comes this jump phase where he spawns the totems. You want to keep moving so that you don't get hit by the jump. Generally it's very important that none of the players get hit by the jump, because the damage is already quite high. You can see he pulls his AoE damage, there it was. Like ever so often, not exactly sure how many seconds it is, there it is again. That's just the base mechanic of the boss. He just does this damage that's not associated with any sort of thing that is happening on the screen. It's just the boss which deals this damage at a regular interval. There it is again. And that's something you have to heal around, and then any sort of failure damage combined with this damage tick can lead to some major problems. Generally, I would say, don't be afraid. He has two phases. He does tank healing, then the totems, then again the tank hit, then the totems, then the intermission. And the intermission takes a long time. So don't be afraid to go through all of your cooldowns in this first phase. It is a lot to heal, and it's not always that easy to heal, but you can blow through all of them because it will be about 1.5 to 2 minutes before the fight even picks back up again. And your cooldowns will rotate back up. Sure, I probably won't have revival again in this fight, but all of the others I will have available again, so it does make sense to meet this high healing check that this boss puts down with a high usage of your cooldowns. Yeah, simply don't be stingy with the cooldowns, what I'm trying to say, because they may be needed due to the high damage, and they will rotate back up, so you don't necessarily need them as a safety net for the future. And we get in the next phase, and all of my cooldowns are ready again. And again, I am willing to go through all of them in quick succession if need be. I'm not exactly sure, actually, if this whole section repeats exactly, if he does all the things twice, and then the intermission begins again, because he never lived that long in my experience, but it's probably what's going to happen, so the whole logic probably applies for the entire duration of the fight. As we finish out the key by getting the little bit of trash that we sort of left out. Yeah, so all in all, Mistweaver, we haven't really talked that much about Mistweaver in this key. One reason is that I'm not that familiar with the specialization yet. I can't speak so well on the talent interactions and what exactly are the optimal spell sequences and so on. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that it's just, the key is relatively uneventful. as it draws on the raw healing power of this specialization. If you just go in and you do your damage rotation and you are aware of your cooldowns and use them when this damage rotation is not sufficient anymore to just keep spamming the group up, then the class is very straightforward and very, very powerful. So it's a lot of fun to play. If you haven't played Mistweaver Monk yet, I recommend looking into it. I was wary of it as well, because I didn't enjoy it as much in previous expansions, but I do very much enjoy it now. So yeah, let me know what you think about Mistweaver Monk. Let me know what you think about these segments of the video. If you enjoyed it, I will try and keep sort of this format going a little bit. Other than that, thank you very much for watching this segment, and perhaps see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to this segment of the video, which is about Holy Priest, specifically a level 12 Magister's Terrace dungeon played on the class. As far as dungeons are concerned, I would say that Terrace is one of the easier dungeons in this season, but there are some areas in which things can go wrong, and they will. However, one of the areas where things seldom go wrong is this first pull, because you are constrained in the size of the first pull by the constraints of the room, and basically all you need to watch out for as a healer is dispelling the ethereal shackles, which is a root, on the tank, and then the crowd dispersal cast from the arcane sentry, which should go off momentarily. There it is, which is a rather substantial AoE hit. But as long as it doesn't one-shot the group, it is not very impactful, because there's very little other damage going on in this pull. Some groups choose to lust this first pull. This group, we didn't choose to lust the first pull, but instead lusted the second pull. It does make sense to lust early, because you can see the timer is about 34-35 minutes, one or the other. So you have prospectively one additional lust available if you use one before the first boss. And the way toward the first boss is not super short, so you won't make it there before 30:30. This pull, especially with lust, is also rather inconsequential. There's some holy fire debuffs going out that need to be dispelled, and sometimes they can compete for your dispels with the polymorphs if those should go through, and you need to decide whether you want to remove the polymorph for additional damage or remove the holy fire for additional safety. But all in all, these pulls are fairly trivial. I'm always surprised at how much can go wrong in this room. Here again, someone pulled the codexes. I have aggro due to healing. The tank luckily notices this relatively quickly and takes them off me. Otherwise I would have died, because I still had aggro after Fade. Now these books are fairly challenging. They actually deal a lot of damage, and tank players often aren't aware of this. You can see they do this arcane cleave on 2 players each, and this does a lot of damage. And then when paired with the pyromancer, there's actually a ton of group damage coming in. Luckily, Holy Priest's kit is extremely well suited for dealing with this kind of a AoE bursty damage profile, because you have so much cleave healing available to you via your Prayer of Healing, and also via Benediction, which sends out a Cosmic Ripple onto the group for additional cleave group healing, and also your Holy Word Serenity nowadays also cleaves. So essentially every spell you do, or almost every spell you do, has the potential to not only heal the target targeted by it, but additional targets as well. And yeah, I think Holy Priest really is the healer that most deviates from the new philosophy that Blizzard have employed with Midnight, in the sense that they wanted to be healing and damage patterns to be less spiky and slower, in the sense that healing HP bars up takes more time and HP bars dropping does the same. And for the most part, this has worked really, really well. But when I play Holy Priest, I feel like it is more so still the case than it is for other healers. Obviously the mobs do the same damage regardless of what healer I'm playing, But I find that as I don't have any HOTS as a Holy Priest, and my healing then also is not a mitigation healing, but a reactive healing to the damage that's coming in, yet the healing then is extremely powerful and able to really move the HP bars substantially in a very short amount of time. Like you can see here, me topping myself off with a Holy Word Serenity in essentially one global. Yeah, it still gives a bit of the old vibes from the War Within. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I really enjoy the Holy Priest playstyle. It feels extremely powerful to be able to deliver this kind of HP swinging HPS. And still, I don't necessarily feel more powerful than on the other healers, despite the perceived power of my heals being extremely high. And I think this might be due to the fact that you don't have any background HOTS rolling. Yeah, if you press a button on a Resto Druid, nothing really happens. It just heals. And the Shaman, for example, always has Riptides going. Preservation Evoker always has Reversions and Dream Breath and so on. So the individual heals feel less impactful, but the HP bars are constantly ticking up. This is less so the case outside of this Echo of Light buff for Holy Priest, which is why the button presses feel super impactful. And I think this is actually from a perspective of how the class feels to play, really, really well done. Yeah, now, okay, we are in this first boss room. These pulls are usually pretty challenging because you have to contend with the worms dying and also the Pyromancer going into his ignition cast. So you should be ready for this kind of a damage profile where a lot of damage is going out on the group from many different sources, because many pugs will also not consider that the worms dying in quick succession might impose a problem on the healer. So they will just kill them because DPS goes zook zook, and you will somehow have to deal with it. As a Holy Priest, however, yeah, Prayer of Healing, as long as you have the Lightweaver procs active from having cast Flesh Heal or Benediction beforehand, lends itself extremely well to healing through this. And yeah, you can also feel free to burn through all of your cooldowns in these worm/pyromancer pulls, because you will not need the cooldowns for the boss. This boss is, yeah, it's not completely trivial, because the phase in which you need to collect the orbs actually poses a substantial risk if someone makes a mistake, because if the orbs do reach the boss, can be difficult. If the boss is a little bit wrongly positioned, then he will stand awkwardly in a puddle, making the soaking more difficult, and the soaking actually also deals a relatively substantial amount of damage to the player who is soaking them, especially if multiple orbs are collected. Now here comes the first refueling protocol phase. Ideally you would want to spread out a little bit around the boss, and you can see so far the damage is manageable. Ideally the tank will collect a lot of them, because he can much more easily tank multiple hits without putting too much pressure on you as a healer. We're going to skip a little bit ahead here. I think the Shaman dies in the next phase, where you can... Oh, actually he didn't. It was a different key, I think. Never mind. Shaman didn't die. We don't even have a Shaman, so... Would have been strange if the Shaman had died. I do die, however, because we take this Warlock Gate and I just get meleeed by the mobs, and they actually manage to one-shot me. One good thing about Holy Priest then is, however, that you have the Restitution talent, and once every 10 minutes you are allowed to die. It doesn't save the timer though, so we do get the death attributed to our dungeon timer. But yeah, you don't have to run back. You can still support the group and heal through these glaive debuffs, which are extremely hard-hitting abilities. So I think this next section of the dungeon is actually, from a healer's perspective, one of the most intensive sections out of all of the dungeons, because you have these sort of erratic glaive hits going out paired with the holy fire debuffs, as you can see on myself and having been dispelled. Then you have the potential for any additional casts like arcane bolts to go through, players to get sheeped from polymorph, and also the potential for multiple debuffs to stack on top of one another, as we have seen right there. I think I had some time to dispel the Warlock of his Holy Fire debuff and failed to do so. So yeah, that might have been on me. I probably could have saved him better there. It's okay to blow through cooldowns here, as these pulls are very challenging. However, the next pull, directly in front of the boss, also has a pack where the glaives, 2 glaive throwers are in there, and you also have the Holy Fire debuffs, so you need to be really careful about those as well. But I think that Priest's kit again here with Holy Word Serenity and Benediction is rather well suited to deal with this sort of damage profile. Now this pull is a bit, say a bit superfluous. It's usually pulled with the pull beforehand, and you could arguably also pull it onto the next group. But the next group is very challenging, so it makes sense to play it by itself, I suppose. I should rebuff the Warlock with Power with Fortitude, but I seem to have forgotten that. And yeah, you can see again the Holy Fire debuff is going out and the Glaive debuff as well. And yeah, the entire group is taking relatively substantial damage, but we have 4 Lightweaver procs here, and so we can go into substantially spamming prayers of healing to top the group back up. And in that way, Holy Priest has a very easy solution to these kinds of damage events. You don't, like Resto Druid, for example, have to make a million little decisions on what to do next. It's a relatively simple gameplay loop where you accrue the Lightweaver stacks through casting Flash Heal, and then in addition then go cycle into Prayer of Healing in order to be able to consume them and heal the group back up. And if you can, you want to interweave some smites in between for some additional Surge of Light procs that make your abilities not cost any mana. Because that is something that can happen to Holy Priest, is running out of mana. Like you can see here, my mana is a little bit low, because I've been spamming these healing abilities a little bit more without the Surge of Light procs, which makes them cost no mana whatsoever. This boss here is a bit deceptive in its difficulty, I think. It's still one of the easier bosses, especially when the glaive goes on the tank. But I can imagine that at very high key levels this can become very stressful, because the damage that comes from moving into the zone onto the entire group is rather substantial. And also the ticking damage from the glaive debuff is also quite strong. So that's not a problem on a plus 12 key, really, but it can more strongly become a problem at higher levels of play. But for the most part, simple enough. Move into the Void Zone when the Wave of Silence is coming in and when you have the debuff on yourself. You need to be careful. The group needs to somehow coordinate who is moving into the zone at what time. I think at this level we would survive a dual explosion where both players move into the Void Zone at the same time, or the Suppression Zone at the same time. But at higher levels of play this will most likely be lethal. But these players here manage rather well. I did my Divine Hymn here to ramp up some healing, but unfortunately had to move because of a ground puddle during its duration. It's always a bit unfortunate. But yeah. Here you can see also the mage dropped relatively low due to the explosion in the suppression zone going off while he still had the glaives on them. As a general rule, it's good if DPS just use a defensive when they have the glaive debuff applied to them, even though you can rather comfortably heal through it on a plus 12 anyway, even if that's not the case. Now, and after the boss dies, you just go up and reload the Cynosure. I had the bug here a couple of days ago where nothing spawned in the entire hallway, and we already thought the key was bricked, but it was just these kinds of mobs here until the next room, which didn't spawn at all, and so we had to find some count later on. This time that's not the case, but we do have a little bit of a bug going on at a later point in the dungeon. And yeah, this first pull, it's usually this one, after having defeated the second boss, is very uneventful from the perspective of the healer, so you can essentially focus on dealing damage for the most part. And if you're spec'd into the cleave talent on your holy fire, you can do a significant amount of damage, as far as healer damage is significant in this season. But you can see we do about like 36k DPS here. Nothing to write home about, but yeah, might as well press the buttons, right? It could be argued that this pull could also be made a little bit larger, but the next pull includes one of the, what's their name, Void Caller, I think, which are relatively straightforward, but they summon these kinds of adds, and they must be killed, and then they go into their Void Consumption cast or something, which is essentially a relatively strong, Consuming Shadows, relatively strong AoE ability, so you want to have some ramp going at this point, so some Lightweaver stacks for Prayer of Healing, and also be ready to use, for example, a Holy Word Serenity to get through it. But again, as a Holy Priest, not particularly difficult to deal with these AoE, shorter AoE rot abilities. I'll move on to the next part of the dungeon, where we have some Void Terrors. They cast Terror Wave, and this needs to be interrupted. Otherwise it will fear the entire group for, I think it's about 2 seconds. And this can lead to a wipe relatively quickly. And I think we do this tiny pull here in order to not have to deal with 3 Void Terrors, because the next room also features 2 of them. Usually you probably could deal with 3 of them quite easily, but yeah. I'm generally a friend of a bit of a better safe than sorry mentality when it comes to Mythic Plus. Of course, if you're playing at a high enough level, you cannot really have this mentality, because you need to make risky pulls and big pulls in order to be able to succeed. But at the lower levels of play, that really isn't the case usually. And then then the question becomes, okay, why are we doing these risky big pulls if they are not necessary for succeeding in this key? And if they do work, obviously you will have a bigger margin for error, but on average they probably reduce the likelihood of success. The argument I can see is that obviously if you do these pulls frequently, then you will be prepared for doing them at a higher level when this level then comes into your reach of being played. And if you have never practiced them before, then if you can't perform them at a low level, you won't be able to perform them at a high level. So I do get somehow the argument for making these bigger pulls, which are needed at a high level, also at the lower level from a practicing perspective. But for the most part, I enjoy just getting the dungeon done. And in the way of getting the dungeon done stands the Devouring Tyrant with his Devouring Strike on the tank. Huge healing absorb. I probably wasn't paying sufficiently much attention. The tank almost died here. Despite the fact that as a Holy Priest you have an extremely strong kit of dealing with it, because your single target healing is among the best out of all the healers, so you can just hold your Holy Word Serenity for spamming the tank back up with 2 of them if need be from the Devouring Strike, and then cycle into Apotheosis, which by the way I chronically underuse. I should be using it much more frequently. I treat it sort of as a longer cooldown than it really is. I also find its usage a bit clunky, a bit awkward, and it's also an ability that needs a bit of practice. So from this perspective, I should be using it more often just to get some practice on dealing with it, because you have these cooldown reductions which are quite substantial, and the question becomes, okay, if you reduce so much of the cooldown, then what do you do with the abilities? How do you time them? How do you juggle the cooldown reduction with the actual with the actual casts? Yeah, I don't know. I think I underuse it because it's on a global cooldown. I think that's the problem. It's also the same I have on Paladin with the Aura Mastery. I also use that too infrequently because, yeah, maybe because I'm not planning far enough ahead. And then when I need a healing cooldown, I need to heal. And I can't really afford to press a button that doesn't, which is the case for both of them. But yeah, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. That in situations where I think, okay, this would be really useful now, I can't really use it because of the global cooldown, and also some generic disregard of the ability. In any event, we move on to Gemellus, which is octopus, multiple octopods, octopi. I'm not quite sure what the plural is here. Very straightforward fight, not overly difficult if the melees don't die to this grasp, but unfortunately they always do. And I mean, I don't get it. It's the same as in Skyreach, where every time, even at the higher levels, even if you play it with plus 12, 13, 14, every time at the bird focusing event before the third boss, someone dies. Every single time, even the ranged players die. For melee, I have some more understanding, but yeah, it's it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine maybe, but someone dies on this Astral Grasp every single time, and I wonder why. I mean, obviously they want to deal damage, but for example, the Warlock, he really shouldn't die. Pally, I mean, damage brain, yeah, okay, maybe, but it generally shouldn't happen. However, I could also play it better. Ideally, what you want to do when the Astral Grasp goes out is position yourself as far away as possible from the mob in order to be able to get some casts through without being pulled into the Void Zone. By the way, one bug going on, this is what I was talking about, the boss stops doing any abilities. He hasn't done anything for the last 35 seconds or so. And now he does something again, which is weird. I also had this bug beforehand where he didn't do anything. And I already was mentally in the state of this boss isn't doing anything anyway. So now I sort of panic, use my Divine Hymn, because I was very surprised that suddenly he did start back up again and doing an ability. I can't think that this is planned, that the boss does have this downtime. I'm not able to exclude the possibility, but I think it's just a bug that he stops doing any abilities for like 30 or 40 seconds. In any event, I finally remember to rebuff Power Word Fortitude, and we move into the last section of the dungeon, which, yeah, mostly more of the same. Devouring Tyrants and the Void Callers, which pose the main threat here. And then some very easy pulls, like this one, for example, where you just kill a couple of Void Terrors. Yeah, obviously you need to make sure that they don't fear you. But then again, in this kind of pull, even if they do, you probably won't wipe. So, yeah, there's definitely a bit of downtime here, a bit of possibility to reset your cooldowns, which you don't really need to, because they're probably not on cooldown from the previous encounter. Although the Gemellus fight does actually deal a substantial amount of damage when the Cosmic Sting goes on to 5 players, as we have seen in the end, so you might need to use a healing cooldown there, and I have in Divine Hymn, yeah, as well. In any event, this pull serves as a good way of sort of resetting everything, because the pull that is coming up at the top with the two big guys, Devourer and Tyrant, is relatively challenging. But I think we are skipping them, actually, as I can read in the chat right now. The Warlock wants to skip. I didn't read it while I was playing, I don't think. So I'm a little bit confused when everybody is not running to the next pack, if I remember correctly. And now we just kill this pack. Also a very uneventful pull. Take a little bit of care of the tank maybe, but not really too much going on. And then we move into the final boss encounter of the dungeon, which yeah, it's definitely somewhat challenging encounter for a healer. It's one of these typical sort of rot encounter fights, or it can become one if mistakes are made. Yeah, so we go up to the boss. We don't have the percentage just yet, but I think we do the boss first. And you can see, despite the fact that the key was reasonably clean, we don't have that much time left. Not exactly sure if our damage is a little bit underwhelming overall. I haven't really been paying attention. And now on this boss, you basically want to play some sort of ping pong. The tank gets this debuff on him. He will ideally move out to the side. Then you can dispel it. Good tanks will move out preemptively, so that you just, as soon as it comes out, you can immediately dispel. That's the optimal scenario. Otherwise, you have to have a little bit of positional awareness in where the tank is at, and then look, okay, has he moved out yet? And then be able to dispel it. Here I look to the right, okay, I see the tank has moved out, I dispel it, so the tank can then still stand in front. But he unfortunately jumped into the boss, so he got stunned there and required a little bit of healing, but all is good. Yeah, in addition, if you can manage, it's good if you as a healer have a quadrant on your own and don't stand next to other players in order to reduce the likelihood that you will be hit by any of the orbs flying through the room. If someone's standing directly next to you, your reaction time will be a little bit shorter, will have to be a little bit shorter in order to be able to dodge them. So ideally you have some space between you and the other players. Obviously this then means that you need to do the soaks. We missed a soak over here, and now the encounter becomes much, much more difficult for you as the healer. And I sort of switch mentally from a bit of a maintenance mode into crisis mode. I check my cooldowns. Unfortunately, I don't have that many of them available. I used my Apotheosis and my Halo already, and now I'm basically just, yeah, I don't really have anything here. All I can do is sort of juggle between my Lightweaver stacks for Prayer of Healing and for Flash Heal and Benediction, and sort of hope that this will carry me through, in addition to my Power Word, Holy Word Serenity. Luckily we do manage to power through this, but you can see over here again, there is another puddle which is not being soaked, so my expectation that the worst is over does not come true, because again we failed to soak. I should use PI, yeah, there I use PI. Mostly for myself this time actually, less for the damage on the mage, as we miss another puddle, and now that essentially becomes unhealable, especially if you don't have any mana left like myself. But the Restitution talent once again comes in clutch, and I am able to dispel the tank from his debuff. And the boss is at 8% HP, and I will also come back to life in a second and be able to do a little bit more. Yeah, so we do manage to kill the boss in the end as I lie dead on the ground. So yeah, you can see how quickly this can get out of hand if these soaks are not being done correctly. And I think it's a mechanic that is not meant to be healed. Yeah, maybe one of them, but at the higher levels of play, every single failure will wipe you. And now I also have to be a little bit careful as the tank drops slow immediately, and this is a Tyrant and I'm pretty dry on heals. I just need to sort of spam Flash Heals and Holy Word Serenity to keep the tank alive here, because he had already procced obviously from the boss fight. So that would be a shame if we now wipe to the one single Tyrant. And not manage to time the key. So yeah, a little bit of a tough ending there, but overall and a relatively enjoyable key, I would say. And I really like Holy Priest. I'm not so much an expert on it yet, that I can speak a lot on how the exact interactions of abilities are supposed to work out and so on. But I really enjoy the playstyle of sort of juggling your holy words with the cooldown reduction and the Lightweaver stacks, alternating Holy Light and Prayer of Healing, and then also having this priority target healing going on. where you have the cleave onto the rest of the group. Super interesting, super enjoyable, and I'm really looking forward to playing more of Holy Priest in the future. Yeah. If you want to see any of this, please let me know in the comments. If you enjoy this kind of a format, even if the class is not one that I am super big of an expert in, please let me know, and then I will find a way to continue this. Yeah, thank you for watching this segment of the video, and perhaps see you in the next one. Alright, welcome to this section of the video, which is the section on my Wildstalker Restoration Druid, played in a level 14 Seed of the Triumvirate key in a random group. And we will see that it's a random group almost immediately here in the beginning, as we do the first pull, which is usually a Bloodlust pull, including 2 Subjugators. And you can see the tank jumps into the pack at the rear without aggroing this pack at the front. But I am already preparing my healing, because I expect huge AoE damage coming out from the Subjugators any minute now, and I need the HOTS rolling already, causing me to draw aggro from these mobs. I neither stealth think they can get away, because they have taken an interest in my Treant here, but as soon as I leave stealth they immediately re-aggro me. I should have bark-skinned immediately here probably, and now I go into sort of a panicked Convoke into Tranquility reaction, hoping that it will be enough. And it was, but I also blew through my cooldowns. And yeah, the Paladin luckily dispelled the Chains of Subjugation. So yeah, that's an important thing to note, that the Chains of Subjugation casts are dispellable by anything that dispels roots or snares. So as a Druid, you can also shapeshift out of them. It can make sense to use shapeshift to get out of them, but it can also be detrimental. So yeah, it's a bit of a judgment call, because essentially you will have to use a global cooldown in order to be able to clear the root, and while you are using this global cooldown, the rest of your party will take damage from the chains. And yeah, you should not clear the root if you are at full HP, and you run the risk that someone might die from the chains because you're not healing them for this global root clearing global which you have used on yourself. In any event, for single subjugators, the damage is quite manageable, I would say. Tendentially, you want your Life Bloom on yourself or on one of the DPS players for the duration of this Chains of Subjugation cast, or generally for any sort of AoE damage event, you tendentially want to move Life Bloom off of the tank and onto one of the DPS players or on yourself. The advantage of having it on yourself is, if you have the mental capacity for it, which I frequently also do not yet have, is that you can position your efflorescence, because efflorescence will spawn around the target. You can see here on the Evoker, around the target which has Life Bloom on them. Now I have moved it on myself. You can see it moves to myself, and now I can position myself next to the Warlock, and both of us will now benefit from the blooming effect of Life Bloom, triggered by consuming the Soul of the Forest buff. Due to verdancy, yeah, when Life Bloom blooms, it also heals 2 targets inside your efflorescence. And now you can see the next Chains of Subjugation are coming out. We have a good base layer of HOTS rolling. I have the Life Bloom on myself, and now I want to, yeah, I still find the time to cast Wild Growth. Now consume the buff here on the Paladin with Swiftmend. Now I get Soul of the Forest, and this is your big healing power spike. I get Soul of the Forest and I cast Regrowth probably, yeah, Regrowth, and you can see it tops the entire group immediately because it's a Soul of the Forest empowered Regrowth, dealing a lot of healing by itself. But you should also be able to see now, if it hasn't already happened, on my HP bar, the afterburn effect from Everbloom's Blooming Frenzy. You can see how my HP bar ticked up even further. That is because Life Bloom goes into this Blooming Frenzy when Soul of the Forest is consumed. Which is also why you want to move Life Bloom to targets taking priority damage, as you can see I have done here on the Paladin. Moved Life Bloom on them, and yeah, essentially, so it has multiple advantages moving Life Bloom to the priority targets. The first one is Mastery. Life Bloom will increase the amount of healing they receive due to your Mastery, as multiple healing over time effects will lead to more healing than fewer healing over time effects. But also when you consume Soul of the Forest on this target, maybe I will do it now. I don't have Soul of the Forest right now, so it doesn't really matter for the Evoker at this point. But when you consume Soul of the Forest on the target, they will benefit from Everbloom's Blooming Frenzy, which is extremely powerful. So the strategic placement really of Life Bloom is the bread and butter of Druid gameplay at the moment, where you want to move it to the targets which benefit most from the Soul of the Forest consumption and the Blooming Frenzy triggered by it. The first boss is very easy. It's basically an ad control fight in this dungeon. He doesn't really have any sort of dangerous abilities. You can see Decimate going out on the Evoker right here. He jumps out, spawns a puddle. You want to carry these puddles to the side because they cause the ads that run through them, which must not reach the boss, to run faster in them. So you don't want to have them in awkward situations or awkward placements. And now the Oozing Slamcast is the only real damage that comes in this fight. But it's not particularly dangerous, at least not at this key level, so you shouldn't need any healing cooldowns to power through it. So the essential thing is that the ads don't reach the boss. Now my gear is really low here, so I'm very much focused on healing, but if you can't find any additional damage as a healer, then it makes sense to put this damage on the ad. As you can see, the DPS killing the ad down here in the corner right now. Other than that, the boss is pretty straightforward. You can, if you have a movement ability, you can dodge the jump from the boss. I think it goes out on me next, if I remember correctly. Then I can show you what I mean. First of all, Oozing Slam again. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Just have a Swiftment ready for it to trigger Soul of the Forest and then consume it, and you'll be fine. Now it's on me. I carry it out, and now I wait for him to jump and then jump myself so that I don't take any damage from it. And yeah, the boss is pretty straightforward, but if any ad ever reaches the boss, for example, because the player targeted by Decimate does not carry it out appropriately, or moves on top of an ad, for example, if a melee player is targeted by Decimate and he's just in the process of dealing damage to an ad, then the boss will jump onto the ad and wipe the group. So that's something that one needs to be aware of. But other than that, the boss is pretty easy. We'll skip ahead here a little bit to the next part. Bring me minimally. And yeah, we move into the next pull here. This pull is challenging in that it combines the big pulsing AoE damage from the Rift Warden with individual players being targeted by bleeds. And those players will need substantial priority healing. A good way of dealing with this is to simply move your Life Bloom to the player afflicted by the bleed. You can see myself moving Life Bloom on the Evoker, then going into Swiftment, triggering Soul of the Forest, meaning that my next regrowth or rejuvenation cast will be empowered and will also cause the Life Bloom on this player to go into the Blooming Frenzy, healing for an absolute lot of HP. Should I cast Regrowth now or Rejuvenation to consume my Soul of the Forest? I would argue, as we have 9 rejuvenations active and are all already at the top of abundance, meaning rejuvenation, regrowth will be more effective and cheaper to cast, and we don't really get any additional value from casting a rejuvenation right now because we can't have more than 10. The casting regrowth is the strategically superior choice. But first of all, I cast Wild Growth here, and now move into Regrowth onto the Evoker, and this should heal them up quite substantially. Actually, this is a bit of a mistake, though, because you can expect, because you now, with this Regrowth, you consume your Soul of the Forest buff. It's already gone here, it's no longer displayed because it's just about to be consumed. And this will heal the Evoker, right? He will receive a substantial amount of healing now. Not from the Regrowth cast, but from the Blooming from Everbloom. because Life Bloom will bloom and then additionally heal from Everbloom. So the healing on the Evoker will just be overhealing. He will be healed for so much that he doesn't need that. The Warlock needs it. So the regrowth should have targeted the Warlock. And this is a bit of a general wisdom actually for triage healing as a Druid. If you have 2 targets, and there are many encounters which require healing of 2 targets, move move Life Bloom on one of the targets and let the Life Bloom healing from consumption of Soul of the Forest do the work. Focus your healing on the other target. So, yeah, I mean, in this case, the Evoker took some additional damage here, so it wasn't perhaps the worst thing in the world. But yeah, tendentially it's the right it's the right thing to do to not prioritize the target with your Life Bloom if another player is afflicted by the same damage profile and is taking the same amount of damage. Then you want to prioritize this player because he doesn't have Life Bloom and will benefit less from its effects. Overall, I would say Druid's gameplay requires a lot of quick decision making, and I would also say it is more so than in the last season the most demanding healer to play, because you have so much to do. You constantly have to switch the position of your Life Blooms. Its positioning is also more important because you only have 1. In the last season you frequently had 2 of them. And the healing effect from the blooming of Life Bloom is so powerful that if you let it go to waste on a target which is at full HP, then that is a huge inefficiency in the end. So you constantly have to decide, okay, who is supposed to have the Life Bloom? It can make sense for some AoE events like this one to just primarily have it on yourself, because by having it on yourself, as mentioned, you control the positioning of your efflorescence, and ideally you would want to have as many players in the efflorescence as possible, because due to verdancy they will also be healed by Life Bloom's healing, or healing when it blooms. If you have a melee heavy group, it can also make sense to prioritize the melee DPS, because they will always be bunched up and therefore always benefit from verdancy, because all of them will be staying in efflorescence's area. In this case, even here, you could argue that the Paladin should be a priority target for Life Bloom, because then he and the tank will always be healed. Otherwise, I would have to do a better job of positioning myself, for example, next to the Warlock or next to the Evoker, because although standing next to the Evoker is very difficult because he just flies around from A to B all the time. But yeah, regarding this positioning, you obviously need a lot of mental awareness in order to not only look at the party frames and dodge any ground effects, but also be aware where your teammates are standing and then standing near them to make them benefit from efflorescence. So definitely an area of high skill expression, but not one that I have sufficiently mastered just yet. This area of the dungeon is more of the same. You essentially have these Rift Wardens. Sometimes some tank damage can go in when the tank creates a gap between himself and the champions. They will charge him and deal a high amount of damage. This can also be very dangerous for tanks who like to chain pull. They will move away from the pack and run toward the next pack, and then the champions will charge them all at the same time. Extremely dangerous, and I've seen many a tank die to it so far. Other than that, yeah, you have to deal with the pulsing AoE damage from the Rift Warden here, but simply using the same formulas as before. We're going to skip ahead a little bit here to the next part of the dungeon. The tank takes a little bit of an interesting route here. It's always a bit difficult if you're not so familiar with the route yet to know what to... and he unfortunately didn't aggro them, so my rejuvenation draws some aggro. If you don't know exactly the type of mobs that will be in the pack that you are about to pull, because, for example, mobs like the Subjugator are so important and so dangerous that you sort of need to prepare for their presence. But here I don't think we have that dangerous of a mob pack. We again have the Rift Warden with a pulsing AoE effect, and then we have the bleeds going out on individual players, who should then ideally become your Life Bloom priority targets. Other than that, you want to essentially use Wild Growth almost on cooldown. As I press Tranquility here, that I'm not exactly sure why I did that. It didn't seem like a particularly dangerous situation. Maybe it was a fat finger or something. Now you can see the bleed is going out on the Paladin. I would have liked to see myself move the Wild Growth to him, but he was at full HP, so in the end it didn't matter that much. Now here I really err on the side of overhealing. I'm not really familiar with the timers yet. I also don't really have a timer add-on. Not really sure when exactly the damage will be coming in. Now you can see it's happening again. So I would rather over-prepare. You also see I almost don't do any damage in this dungeon, because I really just want to make sure that nobody dies. So I'd rather have my HOTS rolling all the time, if I'm not so familiar yet with when the damage exactly will be coming in, especially in the fights where this familiarity is low, than to be surprised. Now this encounter is not particularly challenging, but one thing to look out for is that there will be a charge on one of your players, which you can see here from this symbol, and it does some initial damage, and then it also applies a ticking debuff. And ideally you want to move your Life Bloom to the target afflicted by the charge. So as a general rule, whenever someone is charged, I move my Life Bloom to them. And yeah, help them heal through it. Now here we can see there have been some soaks. The Paladin has a big problem here because he soaked 3 orbs and then additionally has the charge on him, so I give him Bark Skin to be able to live through that. And yeah, you at this boss encounter you need to clear the void orbs on the ground using the sort of void zones that spawn around you, and whenever one of them is missed, then one of the players needs to soak the missing zone before the void detonation cast goes out from the boss. If the zone is not soaked when the void detonation cast goes out, then everyone will receive an additional debuff from this void orb that hasn't been soaked. Here you can see we are missing the one back here. Now someone needs to move into it. The tank did that. Ideally it should be the tank most of the time. And then he will receive a little debuff here, but the entire group will be okay. And then this void detonation cast does a decent amount of damage, but if no orbs remained unsoaked, then it's absolutely manageable. So it's, as far as AoE damage events go in this season so far, it's moderate, but not particularly high. Here you can see again my rule of thumb: if a player gets charged, they will be targeted with Life Bloom. So I got charged, now the Warlock got charged, I should apply Life Bloom, yep. Trigger Soul of the Forest. And then now I have 10 abundance stacks, and you can see myself just going into spamming some regrowth on the party because it's essentially free at this level of abundance. The Evoker, unfortunately, on top of the bleed, also soaked Void Orb here. Yeah, and essentially it's more of the same then. You need to watch out for this jump attack and priority heal the player who is targeted by the jump attack. Now it's the Warlock. Life Bloom on top of them and simply heal them up. And then you want to leave Life Bloom on the player who has last been targeted by it for the Void Detonation cast, because you really want 3 stacks of Life Bloom to be active during this cast. So it doesn't make that much sense to move it to another player again before the Void Detonation goes off. Yeah, so it's not a difficult encounter, really. The healing requirements are moderate if no mistakes are made with the soaking of the orbs. and if no orbs are soaked accidentally, which actually happened here quite a lot. You saw that my teammates often had the debuffs from soaking even before the orbs were cleared, and still the healing was pretty straightforward. Here you can see a classic example of cleave healing as a druid, or a healing of 2 targets who require priority healing. And as I said earlier, Life Bloom on 1. They will benefit from Soul of the Forest and the Life Bloom blooming. Priority heal the other. So Swiftman should go on the other, and your casts of Regrowth and any additional rejuvenations should also go on the other. Let's see if I do that. Okay, we cast Regrowth on the other target. Did not... I know I used Swiftman here, yeah. And that's also just a rinse and repeat thing. It becomes a little bit more tricky when 2 of these Void-infused destroyers are fought against. And you can see immediately, okay, they go out. Life Bloom on myself, priority healing on the Paladin. Damage is moderate, it's not that big of a deal. But if 2 of them come, which we'll have in a moment here, then it becomes a little bit more challenging. Okay, now we see it again. Okay, good reaction by the Evoker actually. Immediately used Obsidian Scales when being targeted by the Void-infused Destroyer and the Bleed at the same time. I also moved my Life Bloom to him. I would have Barkskinned if he had not used the defensive here, and then follow the same strategy as before, as our Paladin gets destroyed by the frontal attack of the Void-infused Destroyers. And now I feel comfortable enough to go into the tiny bit of cat weaving that I have done in this dungeon. I think it was still like a 40 damage log or something. Not something to be particularly proud of, but yeah. Like I like to preach, don't focus on dealing damage. If ever someone dies because you are dealing damage, then you have made the mistake. And the little bit of extra healer damage really doesn't account for it, especially in a dungeon like Seed where the timer is so forgiving. Yeah, so more of the same. 2 targets being targeted. 1 has Life Bloom, the other one is being focused by my healing, because the Life Bloom target is safe already due to the effects of Life Bloom's blooming. Now comes a pack of 2 Void-infused Destroyers, as I should rebuff my Wild Growth. And this actually, I was afraid that he would pull the pack on the left, which does a big pulsing AoE damage. This would have been very challenging, but he doesn't. He pulls these 2 with some other pack. Okay, you can see the Evoker is targeted twice. Good that the Life Bloom was on him. I gave him Barkskin, and he also, again, reacted well using his second charge of Obsidian Scales, meaning that he's basically, with these 2 buffs on him now, almost immortal, especially with the healing over time effects. But good reaction. It can happen here in these fights that one player will be targeted twice, which obviously deals a substantial amount of damage. But other than that, it's the same triage healing situation. The target which is most at risk should get your Life Bloom, and the other target should receive the priority healing. And again, yeah, I heal the Warlock with Swiftman, with Regrowth, and I have Life Bloom on myself. Now we switch the same game to the Evoker and the Paladin. And of course, if one of the targets drops unusually low, then this priority rule of thumb can be broken, of course. The Life Bloom target might be the target that needs the priority healing, and then you should target your spells at that target. But yeah, just as a general rule, this makes sense. Now here we have some mobs spawning these void rifts, or however they are called, and they have these little orbs flying from them. You don't want to get hit by these orbs. The damage is manageable, but relatively substantial. The problem is when you get hit by the orbs while you have this void infusion cast on you, because that deals a substantial amount of damage. I'm also a bit worried about the Warlock here, because he is currently doesn't have any odds on them. Probably will be Wild Growth into Swiftman on the Warlock into Rejuvenation, I would expect. Or I just Convoke. Acceptable. It's generally not the worst idea to Convoke frequently. Also from an efficiency perspective, if a Convoke is only on a 1 minute cooldown, using it too infrequently is a mistake in my view. But it's of course a trade-off between having Convoke when you need it and the efficiency gains promised by using it. Obviously you can also use it well for damage and so on, which I'm just not doing here very much because, yeah, like I said, my Druid doesn't have very good gear, and I'm also not that familiar with the keys yet, where I am in the process of beginning to optimize for damage. This is something that's not at the forefront of my mind. However, maybe I could have kept my Convoke here, although it's almost back up, because this pack is actually pretty dangerous and I'm a little bit underprepared here. Because, I don't know, the Voidbound Weaver, or what's his name, he does a big pulsing AoE damage for the better part of the duration of the fight. And yeah, it can be challenging to heal through, especially when the pull is somewhat uncoordinated. And this happens here a lot, so be prepared. Now we took a bit of an unusual route in my experience, going into the room and then to the right and around. Most tanks will just jump down and immediately jump into this pack. And you know how tanks are sometimes. They will go over the edge and then they will heroic leap or demon hunter jump into the pack, and the big AoE damage starts ticking while the entire party is still up on the previous level of the dungeon. And if you don't expect that, then this damage can be quite lethal. Now for this boss fight, he's also pretty easy. The only damage that comes out in this first phase is the Void Infusion, so similar to the what the mobs have been doing here in this room. And then you need to dodge the orbs which are flying around. Ideally, I would like the tank to always reposition the boss a little bit, especially in this first phase, so that we don't stand in the middle of all the orbs, because it's much more difficult to dodge if the orbs are coming from all sides than it is, for example, if they are all coming from the front or all coming from the rear. The main damage happens in this fight from this collapsing void cast. Essentially pushes all of the players out and then draws them back in. What you want to have is Life Bloom. It's on the tank now. That's actually not good, because the tank doesn't need that at all. What is good there is that this sort of mechanic forces everybody to be stacked in your efflorescence, which amplifies your healing quite substantially. But yeah, Life Bloom shouldn't have been on the tank there. It should have been on myself or one of the DPS players. But you see what I mean when I say the tank should ideally move the boss, because now the orbs are coming from all sides, making it unnecessarily dangerous. It's still not super difficult to dodge, but especially as a healer where attention is often split, when, for example, someone else gets hit, as the Paladin is now, then also your own attention will be focused on that, and you will also be more likely to get hit. And I think I do get hit once or so in this fight, if I do remember correctly. Not quite sure. And then he spawns some tentacles which need to be killed. It's possible that some of the tentacles are still alive during this collapsing void phase, which will then make the healing requirements bigger. You can see I immediately cast Wild Growth before the collapsing void starts. Always a good idea to align your Wild Growth triggering with the beginning of a big AoE event. First of all, because it's just basic AoE healing, but also because it gives you a target for consumption via your Swiftment to trigger Soul of the Forest. So we have Wild Growth rolling on everybody. I moved the Life Bloom on myself, a little bit late, only at one stack, but it's okay. And then we consumed the Wild Growth stack on the Evoker immediately using Swiftment. And now we have an empowered Rejuvenation or an empowered Regrowth. Again, I would argue using Regrowth is the superior choice here, because we are already at 8 stacks of abundance, our maximum is 10, so we don't really benefit that much from an additional rejuvenation, even though the tank's rejuvenation is about to run out. So yeah, we go into regrowth for the consumption, And you should see again myself being strongly healed in a second here from the blooming of Everbloom. And that should also sort of also heal the others to a lesser extent. So you can see how my HP tick up immediately. And this is this blooming effect. This is why it's so important that after you consume Soul of the Forest, the life bloom target will just tick up really quickly in their HP, and some of this healing will also trickle to the other players which are near them. One due to verdancy, and second due to another Everbloom Apex talent where 2 additional allies within 30 yards are also healed when life bloom does its healing. So, and with these strategies in place, and I'm not making a claim that they are perfect, by the way, I'm just, I'm also still in the process of learning and improving and developing strategies for being a better player. But with these strategies that I've developed in place, most damage events are really, really manageable. Again, we have Collapsing Void, Wild Growth. Okay, let's evaluate this situation. Abundance situation is not as good at as the last time, so we only have 5 rejuvenations, making a decent argument that this Soul of the Forest buff should be consumed for rejuvenation and not for regrowth. I have Life Bloom on myself and I precast Wild Growth. So pretty good setup, not perfect. Let's see what we do with this Soul of the Forest. Yeah, we go into rejuvenation, putting our abundance stacks at 8. And now at 8 you can relatively effectively cast regrowth. However, our next Swiftman is relatively far away, so I just go into spamming regrowth on all of the targets in my party. Yeah, it's that was not perfectly played. I think I consumed the Soul of the Forest buff a little bit too early. I wasted the healing from Everbloom because we were still at full HP when I applied the rejuvenation, and we didn't have a second Swiftman to really make use of the strong regrowth empowered by the 8 abundance stacks that we generated. So ideally we would have waited a moment longer, maybe applied 1 or 2 rejuvenations without Soul of the Forest, then consumed the the Wild Growth buff, and then subsequently having gone into regrowth spam or something to really benefit from the Life Bloom healing. But in any event, the damage on this key level is still trivial enough so that these minor sequencing mistakes, as long as the broad picture is in place, don't really make that much of a difference. Generally just align your Wild Growth cast with the beginning of the damage event, have your Life Bloom rolling, and then consume the Wild Growth using Swiftman, and then trigger Soul of the Forest. Now this encounter is challenging, very challenging. It does a ton of damage at the start. I'm not exactly sure why it does so much damage at the start and then seems to get lower. And now here is the phase where you need to shoot these runes, and also this also does a ton of damage. Yeah, and I'm a little bit overwhelmed here right now, and also I don't find any sort of area to move to. I'm not exactly 100% sure about how this fight plays out eventually, where exactly these zones spawn and where they don't spawn, but I was probably a bit mentally overloaded and wasn't able to immediately identify the area which was free. Now I cast Tranquility, and unfortunately it's immediately inside of this beam, and I remember making sort of a judgment call. Am I going to finish the cast and take the hit, or am I going to move out and abandon the cast? And I was like, okay, I'm at full HP. It's probably better to get the Tranquility healing on the group rolling rather than moving out and not taking any damage. But it is a substantial hit here. I almost die, so risky. And now I'm mentally like, okay, I need to focus now. I don't have Convoke, or it's just about to come back up. And any further mistakes will really lead to a major problem. So focus is in order. We are at 10 abundance stacks, which is good. And now we can cast a regrowth freely. And this is probably also what I'm doing. Yeah, casting a lot of regrowth here. Tank's also taking a lot of damage. This should be Convoke. Yeah, now we Convoke. And he also moves into the phase. I think that happens when all of the runes are destroyed, right? And now, yeah, basically just the damage amp phase, where everybody is blasting. You can also obviously contribute to dealing damage in this phase to the best of your ability. But I think from a healing perspective, Lura is probably the most difficult boss to heal right now. Although it's still reasonably fine for Druid because your throughput is so immense. It's not actually that difficult, it was just poorly played. I was overwhelmed by the big damage in the beginning. I didn't expect it to tick for that much, but I hadn't played it on 14 yet. But other than that, yeah, and now I've let my HOTS run out a little bit too much, which is also a bit of a mistake. I'll go back into Convoke. This phase is always a bit of a breather. This is where you can heal your party up, you can apply additional HOTS on your teammates, and then the disintegrate phase starts again. And here essentially what I've figured out sort of in this fight then is you want to move to the end of, so you have this triangular segment which is rotating, so you want to move to the end of the segment, then you can do a cast, then you can move to the end of the segment again, and then do another cast. So yeah, I think that's probably the way to go. And we have another Grim Chorus going off. Not exactly sure how the Paladin died here. Now this is a good setup for the disintegrate. We barely take any damage here because we have all the HOTS on all the players. And ideally you want to maintain this state. I think from a mana perspective you can, if you don't spend too much mana on a regrowth without abundance. And if you use your Convoke frequently. But yeah, I'm not particularly happy with how I played this fight actually. The strategies developed for it aren't that good yet, I would say. But yeah, live and learn. Anyway, we do manage to time the key. And I think it was my first plus 14 on the Druid, or my second. I also have my Sarah's Caverns, I think. Not quite sure. Anyway, yeah, lots of healing requirement in this dungeon. But Druid is very well suited for dealing with these requirements if the Life Bloom is correctly placed and the HOTS are correctly applied. Okay, if you enjoy this kind of content, please let me know. Alright, welcome to the Shaman segment of the video. It's a level 12 Skyreach dungeon. Generally, my Shaman is not the most played class by me, but it's certainly one of the classes I enjoy a lot. And that's despite the fact that it's so simple, or perhaps it's because of the fact that it's so simple. Because, yeah, sometimes I just want to relax and chill out as a healer when I'm playing. I don't always, I'm not always looking for the biggest challenge. That's not to say that playing Shaman isn't challenging or can't be challenging, as the challenge is sort of dictated by the key level. But in the grand scheme of things, because you have so many casts and so on, it's just much less fast-paced. The decisions you are making are somewhat clearer than they are on other healers, so it's a bit less of mental load that's required for playing Shaman effectively, I would say. And that's not a bad thing at all. Here in the second pull, we pull 2 Dread Ravens. That's something you need to be a little bit careful about. First of all, don't get knocked off the map by the Dreadwind. But then the Dire Screech casts are going off right here, you can see it. And I was actually a little bit underprepared, not that big of a deal at this key level, but yeah, should definitely have paid a little bit more attention. They will cast it again, let's see how we will deal with it then. Usually you want to align your power spikes from summoning your ancestors with big damage events. So you can see I already summoned an ancestor, buff is up here. Via Unleash Life in preparation for the next Dreadraven Dire Screech. There it goes off. Now it comes in, first damage is ticking. We should use Ancestral Swiftness now in order to heal up the group, and we do. Ancestral Swiftness into Chain Heal, into another Riptide, into Chain Heal again, I would think. No, we pop down a totem and then go into Chain Heal. Either way is fine, the damage was not that big yet. It also didn't require us to use Ascendance. As a general rule of thumb, it's not the worst idea to just use Ascendance in the first pull of the dungeon, in the Bloodlust pull, to just generate some additional safety, because it's usually not required here either. Because this pull, while dangerous if interrupts don't go out, from a damage perspective is not that difficult to deal with. There are these mobs who do the charges, which put a debuff on players. You can see one going off here. I popped Ascendance here now because I'm like, okay, on the boss I probably won't need it either, so might as well use it, but I didn't think it was strictly necessary just now. And yeah, we deal a lot of damage here, and the pack essentially just melts. Earth Shield is very powerful on the tank. At higher levels of play, you usually want to move Earth Shield depending on the damage patterns that are occurring. Not sure if I will be doing it here in this dungeon. We'll see in the next room where the solar flares are going out on individual players. Usually I would move my Earth Shield to the afflicted player, but yeah, it's probably not that necessary on a plus 12 dungeon just yet, and having the additional healing on the tank is also quite useful. With this boss fight, you really need to be wary of the Fan of Blades cast, which is this one. It's ticking damage. The damage is moderate, and you can relatively easily heal it up with just using Chain Heal on the targets which are buffed with your Riptide. Consume the Riptide to empower the Chain Heal, and so on. You need to be wary of this cast, especially in this portion of the fight, where you will need to move around, as I get targeted here with the knockback. Try to find a position where being knocked back is safe. And now the Fan of Blades is more dangerous, so I would have liked to have seen myself hold the Ancestral Swiftness for using it when Fan of Blade goes out in this phase of the fight, because this is where you will need some additional healing power if things go wrong, whereas in this phase of the fight it's not really necessary to use Ancestral Swiftness, as I do it again. I'm not super happy with that, because the Fan of Blade damage wouldn't be enough to kill the team even if you didn't heal at all, and you can just heal it back up afterwards. Yeah. So essentially, from a healer's perspective, this fight is not particularly challenging. All you need to do is healing the team while remaining aware of these flying chakrams, and at the same time not getting knocked into the whirling swirlies on the ground. What's also useful, I haven't been doing it here, but I have started applying that at a later point in time. You can use your, I'm not exactly sure, a gust of wind or however it's called, to counteract the knockback. So either you do it like this, like I'm doing here, get knocked back into something, make sure nothing is behind you, but sometimes it can be easier to make sure that nothing is in front of you, because you are looking to the front, right? And if you get targeted by it, you will be knocked back, and then you can use your gust of wind to jump back forward while you are being knocked back. And in that way, you don't really have to worry about what is behind you, because as soon as you get hit, you counteract the backwards movement by your own forwards movement, and you essentially land where you started. So that's what I started doing, but it's still a bit of a judgment call. I do it differently from situation to situation, depending on where the swirlies are at. I link here because the tank dropped really low. These pulls can get a bit dangerous if the tank does not manage to get the bleeds dispelled. Luckily we also have an Evoker who can bleed dispel. And other than that, yeah, these pulls aren't particularly challenging though, as long as the casts are being interrupted and the little solar orbs on the ground are killed. But from a healer's perspective, not much is happening here. And not much is happening actually for most of the dungeon if no failure damage is taken. As we are about to go into the next room. This is what I was talking about earlier with the moving of the Earth Shield. But however, the tank is obviously also taking damage, and you can't move the Earth Shield from yourself. You can also only move it from the tank. So it's a bit of a judgment call. Is the tank very safe? Then the player targeted by the Solar Flame, you might want to move Earth Shield on the targeted player just to provide some additional healing. But yet again, the key level is not high enough to make that a necessity. So I don't do it, and it's also not strictly better if you can heal it off without swapping the Earth Shield, because the Earth Shield obviously does work on the tank as well. But yeah, these mobs, especially if pulled like this, are very easy. They just do these targeted spells, they don't hardly do any tank damage, and the Solar Flame is also not that dangerous to heal through. So we are going to skip ahead here a little bit. To the first boss fight, Arachnath. Also a pretty simple boss fight with a very limited challenge. Essentially what you want to do is soak these beams, have your camera positioned far out and a little bit from above. Then you can directly align the beam with your character, so you make sure you soak it, as I'm doing right here. You can see I'm standing exactly in line with the beam. And then you need to heal the 3 targets which are taking damage from the beam. Going through your normal rotation of applying Riptides, consuming the Riptides with Chain Heal, and then applying Riptides again, which are buffed with Coalescing Water for some bigger initial healing of Riptide. And now comes the main challenge of the fight, and you can see myself preparing for it by using Unleash Life and Ancestral Swiftness, because after the second set of beams, the boss has full energy, as you can see down here, and he will go into his Supernova cast. And you need to have the group topped up for the Supernova cast. That is the main challenge in the fight, that you have to heal these 3 targets, and the second time you have to heal the 3 targets, you have to heal them quickly, to be able to have them at full HP when the Supernova hits. And this will become more and more challenging the more damage the Supernova is going to be dealing. If the Supernova in the end is almost a one-shot, then you have to be very on point with this sort of sequencing. Like this, where it takes about 40-50% HP, it's not that big of a deal. And here you can also see I hold my Ancestral Swiftness here in these beams. Not exactly sure if the timing would work out, probably not. So I'm just a little bit more relaxed in the healing. And I use it now for the second set of beams, because I know that the Supernova is coming up. Afterwards again, you see the boss is at full energy. And actually I used it a little bit too early. I still have an Ancestor. Yeah, not perfectly played. I think I made some sequencing mistakes here. People dropped a little bit lower than they should have. And I then popped Ancestral Swiftness. Ascendance. Maybe I should have used Ascendance earlier. Maybe I should have used Ascendance while the second set of beams was going on, in order to more comfortably heal that damage, rather than using it directly when the Supernova hits. That's probably the correct thing to do. But generally you can sort of take this healing a little bit relaxedly, because you have time to heal the players back up after the damage event has subsided. Except for now again, when the boss is going to do his Supernova, but he probably won't get it through this time, because he will die before he casts it. So yeah, not a very challenging encounter, to say the least. You just need to have the raw HPS to be able to heal it, and then be aware of the Supernova moment coming up. Now coming up is the absolute bane of existence for any Unga Bunga DPS player. I don't know how every time I'm here someone dies. So I don't know why. It just happens every time. It's not that difficult to move out, especially as a ranged player. But yeah, let's see if someone dies this time. Yep, and there the Druid goes. Essentially what happens here is that the Suntalon Tamers make their little Suntalon ads focus individual players. It's a fixation mechanic, as is the mechanic of the boss fight. And if these mobs reach the marked player, then they will kill him. So yeah, essentially it's just a runaway mechanic, but I'm always surprised that even at the relatively higher levels of play, like plus 12 now at this point in the season, people die here all the time anyway. This boss is quite challenging from a Puck's perspective, because a lot can go wrong, and if you ever have two of the birds spawning at the same time, then you have a bit of a problem. So let's see what we do with the first bird. It's fixated on me. Ideally, I'm not sure if I'm doing it correctly, ideally you want to kite it to the side of the room as much as possible, so that it's not positioned around the pillar, because with the second bird you will have to move to the pillar in order to hide from the boss's AoE group attack coming up now. And yeah, we can see we root the boss, the mob on top of the egg. We also shouldn't be damaging it down. And here happens the problem. We spawn an additional ad. That should not have happened, so let's see how we deal with that then. It needs to be killed quickly, and ideally not on top of the egg. We put it on top of the egg again, which is wrong. And yeah, essentially those shouldn't die on top of each other as well. So yeah, the kiting done by the Evoker here is pretty good, although the knockback... okay, if he gets resurrected he doesn't spawn an egg again, so otherwise I would have thought this was a questionable knockback. But yeah, seems to have been fine in the end. As we make the mistake again, do we? No, just barely, it doesn't die on the egg. But you can see how quickly things can go wrong here if the kiting is done incorrectly. And it is being done in pugs, being done incorrectly in pugs all of the time. Luckily, single Sunwing spawning is not difficult to heal, and usually doesn't require you to have any to need any cooldowns. So if you can hold cooldowns for the off chance that multiple of the Sunwings will be spawning at the same time, then it is advisable to do so. One of the things I would like to see myself optimize more as a shaman is the usage of Healing Stream Totem, of the normal Healing Stream Totem. I think the Storm Stream Totem my usage is okay of, but the Healing Stream Totem it doesn't feel very impactful, but you should probably just plop it down so you don't sit on two charges for too long, because the storms, as the Druid jumps off the map, as the Storm Stream Totem stacks on top of the charges for the Healing Stream Totem. So it's not separate. So it is separate, so that you can use your Healing Stream Totem charges without consuming any of those for the Storm Stream Totem. So you should be using them. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I think Shaman's usage of Storm Stream Totem, I haven't 100% figured out how I want to do it. My current approach is, outside of situations where you just need all the healing that you can get, those are special in themselves, where you just plop down everything that you can. My current usage for the Storm Stream Totems is using them in the downtime while I don't have Ancestors up from Unleash Life, and especially from Ancestral Swiftness. So I heal through some damage events, like this one right now. I have my Ancestors up. I heal through it with my Ancestral Swiftness and my Unleash Life, and as soon as those effects fade, or as additional healing is required, I now have my Storm Stream Totem, and I can use it in the downtime where I don't have much additional healing from being able to summon the Ancestors. So I sort of use it as a bridge to bridge the gap in power between my Ancestral Swiftness windows until my power spike comes back online. And this has been working reasonably well for me so far. This last section of the dungeon also isn't particularly challenging. There is some moderate damage going out on the group. If the tank is doing a not so good job, then you will see substantial tank damage coming in here from time to time, which you need to heal through. But for the most part, also the tank damage isn't super high and super dangerous, and then you just need to be wary of these rushing debuffs on individual players. Yeah, so all in all, not like there wasn't anything to heal, but it's not particularly challenging to heal compared with some other encounters. The only thing that is a bit challenging is that the damage can be a little bit erratic, and it's not like just ticking AoE damage, but it is individual players being targeted, so more of a triage healing situation, which can get more challenging if players are taking some failure damage. I don't think I have used Spirit Link once in this dungeon. Not that it was necessary to be used, but still, yeah, I don't really enjoy Spirit Link that much as a healing cooldown. It can be super clutch. I like it in PvP, where you actually use it all the time. But here in these puck situations, especially in the puck situations, yeah, it's just a little bit underwhelming. Not because it's not powerful, but because its use is justified so rarely. Obviously it has a damage reduction effect, which will come into play at higher key levels to sort of soak up big group AoE hits and so on. It can also be a great tool as a tank saver. But I find myself underusing it all the time, which might also just be a mistake on my part then. But I would much rather prefer to have the option to also have Healing Tide, and if I had that option to have Ascendance and Healing Tide, at least for the lower key levels, then I would take it. Because Healing Tide is just a button that comes more naturally, especially if you're not in comms with your group. So Link is always something that needs to be coordinated a little bit, because it doesn't really help if nobody is standing inside it. And yeah, of course you can stand inside of it yourself, but yeah, the player who is dropping low might also be somewhere else, not where you are, and so on. So it has some challenges that make its usage challenging in a puck environment. Now, yeah, with the pulse we are doing, this key is obviously extra safe. Maybe not the most exciting key to watch, I'm afraid, but I didn't watch it back beforehand. We are pulling small, which I think isn't a bad thing. You can see we still time it. It won't be a 2-chest, I guess, but it doesn't need to be. It was just a clean key with some mistakes in terms of jumping off the map and getting hit by the talons before the second boss, but other than that, just very clean. Now this boss, yeah, you want to make sure that you are standing at the rear of the platform so that you don't get carried down by the birds. Other than that, you are not being targeted by any mechanics, so you don't have to lay the fire, which is good that you as a healer are sort of exempt from this. And then it becomes just a triage healing scenario where individual players are being targeted by these solar beams, and you need to heal them. But as a shaman, your kit is more than well equipped to handle this damage, especially because your totems provide such a nice background healing. What I would like to see is myself moving my Earth Shield to one of the DPS players, because here really the tank damage isn't that high. I would trust my tank to be able to handle it without fail. Ah yeah, okay, now I move my Earth Shield on the Druid, and that's something that I would generally like to see being done here. The placement of the fire puddles isn't the best, so now you need to be careful a little bit that you place yourself in such a way that you won't get carried into the fire when the bird spawns. Now we are obviously relatively close to the edge, which isn't optimal. Ideally we would want to play on the other side of the room now, so we still have the entire platform to be able to go through. Yeah, let's see what happens here. The bird is spawning. Now we place the fire on the other side. So yeah, it's just a little bit scuffed from the placement of the flames on the ground, but at the end of the day it doesn't matter that much, because on a level 12 the boss dies fast enough that the space restriction doesn't really come into play so far. And yeah, from a cooldown perspective, there's not really the need for any cooldown usage here. just put your Earth Shield on the player targeted by the Lens Flare, and you can see that the Earth Shield itself is almost enough to heal it off, in addition with the Riptide on the player. And essentially you can just completely chill out on this boss fight. Might become more difficult on higher key levels, but like this, there's not much of a challenge to be had here. Yeah, and so the boss is about to die. Overall, I'm very happy with Shaman. It's not a class where you can go into that much strategic depth, I'm afraid. But I think the game also needs a class like that. Obviously, it's not so cool for Shamans who enjoy the strategic depth very much. But yeah, there are plenty of classes which offer more depth than the Shaman does. Anyway, thank you for watching this segment of the video. Please let me know if you have any suggestions, if you enjoyed it, and perhaps I will make more of these kinds of videos in the future. Thank you. Okay, this section of the video is the Evoker section, and Evoker has changed more substantially, arguably, than any of the other healers have changed. First, driven by the removal of Spirit Bloom as a major healing powerhouse, and then to replace it somewhat, the addition of Merithra's Blessing as a new spell stemming from your Apex talents. Also, the playstyle is varied compared to how it was previously, because Lifebind no longer applies via Echo, so from now on, only the target hit by your Verdant Embrace will be affected by Lifebind, and none of the Echo targets will. They will only receive the healing from Verdant Embrace, but they will not be targeted with Lifebind. Therefore, these sorts of Lifebind combo setups that you used to do previously are no longer in existence as Evokers. So Evokers need to look to new solutions for healing, and they do get some. As a general basis for Evoker healing, I would say it's based on sort of 3 layers. The first one is you always want to have reversion on your party. I like to apply reversion with Temporal Anomaly, so just shoot out your Temporal Anomaly, try to hit everyone in your party, then apply reversion. Usually apply it to the tank, because you want it twice on this player for the double effect from Grace Period. However, if individual targets are taking damage or are already low, have taken damage, then it can also make sense to double apply reversion with the main spell on that target to benefit from Golden Hour, in the sense that they will be healed back up for the damage they have taken and will take less damage and more healing going forward. That's the first layer. The second layer of your HOTS is the Dream Breath layer then, where you essentially want to have Dream Breath on your party all of the time, because that works out from a cooldown perspective, so there's no reason not to have Dream Breath on your party. You usually want to use it on rank 1. No real reason to use it on a higher rank, especially nowadays where the initial healing of Dream Breath has been buffed substantially compared to how it was previously. That stems from the final point in your Apex talents, where I think it's 250% or something increase on the initial healing of Dream Breath, and you can see I cast Dream Breath and it heals for quite a lot. So no real reason to put Dream Breath on a higher rank than 1, because if you do, then the duration of the healing over time effect will be lower, and that's not really worth the hassle. Generally, in my opinion, this makes the usage of your Tip the Scales a little bit awkward. The button felt really good beforehand, now it's somehow... Yeah, you should always use it on cooldown. I'm probably not doing it correctly, not using it enough. So probably I should just press it right now to get the haste buff. But I don't, because... Now I used it for a Dream Breath. Because the targets aren't so good anymore, right? You don't have your Spirit Bloom, which was a good target for a fully empowered for Tip the Scales usage. And now you can use it for Fire Breath, I guess. but Fire Breath in itself feels less impactful than it has been before, and it also constitutes your third layer of healing, I would say, where I personally run, forget how the talent is called, where the players are healed for a percentage being done by your by your Fire Breath. There's a bit of variation in the talent trees of Evokers going on right now, where not everybody is running the same talents, so that's somehow the build that I run, where I have that. Some players also don't run that, but in that way I like to put Fire Breath on rank 1 on the entire enemy pack, like I do right here, because this will also provide a little bit of background healing to the group as your third layer of healing. And then from on top of these background healing effects, which should be active essentially all of the time, you then want to layer your additional healing, which is more situational. That is setting up echoes on your teammates for the usage of Verdant Embrace, or for the usage of Merithra's Blessing. As you can see here, I made a sequencing mistake. That's also a problem for Evokers, that if you do make any sequencing mistakes, the class feels very dry now, even more so than it did before. So it was always the case that playing Evoker, making mistakes as playing Evoker was relatively punishing in terms of your setups. But previously you could at least say, okay, I still have Spirit Bloom, I use my Spirit Bloom and I'll be fine. That's no longer the case. You don't have Spirit Bloom anymore, so if you are dry, you are dry. And that's why I press Rewind. I've also seen some players scale the cooldown reduction on Rewind, perhaps because of exactly this reason. I haven't done so. I'm probably too proud to be doing that, and also like my other talent points too much for it. But yeah, that's certainly a problem that occurs with Evokers right now. Anyway, on top of the healing that you have in the background from your reversions, from your Dream Breath and from your Fire Breath on the enemy mobs, you then want to put your combos. So echo your teammates and use Verdant Embrace, or echo your teammates and use Merithra's Blessing. You gain a Merithra's Blessing proc every time you cast a Dream Breath, and you also have a chance for it to proc. And Merithra's Blessing is quite powerful. It's a little reminiscent of how the Apex talents on Druids works, with the Everbloom blooming. So you cast Merithra's Blessing, and then there's a bit of a flurry of healing that comes out and lets the target tick up quite quickly after that. So Merithra's Blessing is essentially a reversion, which means it also benefits from the whole Golden Hour thing, that you heal back the damage that was taken, but then it also heals for quite a lot after that. So it's the setup is quite powerful. If you have Merithra's Blessing on all of your teammates, or have your echoes on all of your teammates, and the party has taken quite a lot of damage, and you then cast Merithra's Blessing, the healing will be quite substantial. I've seen under the in the comment section of my last video, someone commented that Evokers have somehow become the decays. By the way, just as a brief intermission, if you have seen the priest version of my of this video, the priest segment, this is the shaman that died. It was this key that I was referencing. Anyway, someone commented that the Evokers feel to have become like the decays of healers, where essentially you play a bit of ping pong with the HP bars and you let people drop really low, and then you can cast Merithra's Blessing, and then the group will get topped off quite quickly. So it's a very powerful combo, and it feels super satisfying. If you have your teammates echoed, you let the party drop low, you cast Merithra's Blessing, there's an absolute boatload of healing going around. And yeah, that can feel very satisfying to be doing for sure. That being said, playing Evoker as a healer is a lot of work. You have to do a lot of work. It's not quite as much work as Druid, from a sort of constant decision makings and so on, because a lot of your time is spent just applying echoes and so on. But it's also a little bit more vulnerable than the healing on Druid, because on Druid you have so many abilities that you just can use for healing, and their sequencing is important, but it's not as important as it is on Evoker. Whereas on Evoker, if you make major sequencing errors, then you have a big problem going around. On Druid, that is not so much the case. So I think Druid and Evoker right now sort of compete for the spot of the most difficult healer to play. Yeah, hard to say. Evoker also has some mana issues. Yeah, you can use, and almost all Evokers have skilled that, Energy Loop for regeneration. But you also have to find the essence for it. Now my Evoker has very bad gear, it's 252 in this dungeon I just saw in the end screen. So yeah, it probably wouldn't be that bad if the gear was somewhat better. But still, it's not always so easy to find the time for applying, for casting disintegrates for mana regeneration when a lot of damage is coming in, because you need the essence for your essence abilities like echoes and so on. Yeah, so it's a tough contest, but Evoker has some additional restrictions. Yes, the 40 yards range on Dream Breath is very much welcomed, and it helps a ton. It really does. It helps more than I would have expected it to. If someone had told me that this was coming, I would be like, yeah, this will help, but it does help quite a bit, I have to say. So yeah, I ask for mana again because I'm really afraid if we pull the next pack and I am to start with, then we will have some major problem, because I don't have any mana and the next pack is a real chonker from a damage perspective. The problem with these packs is often also that you can't quickly sit down to drink, because they will cast their throw glaives right before they die, and the debuff doesn't disappear when they die, so you still have to do a ton of healing after the mobs have been defeated. But in this case, I do manage to sneak in a quick drink. I also think that Evokers are quite interesting from their tier set perspective. So every time you cast a Verdant Embrace, if you do have the 4-set, it will put a Emerald Blossom on the ground, and because you run the twin leaves, twin echoes or something talent, after you cast this Emerald Blossom, your next echo will apply to 2 targets instead of 1. And you can also see, if you have an Essence Burst proc, then you can also cast Emerald Blossoms for free sometimes, and this can make sense. So you cast a free Emerald Blossom. This will allow you to cast 2 echoes, and then you cast Echo and have 2 echoes. So you have 2 globals, 1 for Emerald Blossom, 1 for Echo, and the result is Emerald Blossom healing plus 2 echoes on your teammates. So it's strictly better than having pressed Echo twice. But it's not that much better. The real value from this twin echoes I think it's called, talent stems from the tier set, where you get this double echo every time you use Verdant Embrace, which is also why it's important to use Verdant Embrace frequently on cooldown, essentially, so you always get this additional echo and a little bit of Emerald Blossom healing from it. This is where the value lies. Emerald Blossom healing is still very underwhelming, so yeah, it's having an Emerald Blossom and an Echo resulting in 2 echoes is not that much better than just casting 2 echoes. It's not that big of a difference. Anyway, it's a nice thing to have, and it allows you, so say you have an Essence Burst proc and you have Verdant Embrace available, you can just Verdant Embrace and then Emerald Blossom, and then you can cast Echo, and you will have 4 echoes on your teammates, because the twin echoes talent also stacks up to 2, so you can you don't have to consume it immediately. So you can cast Verdant Embrace, you get 1 stack of twin echoes, then you cast another Emerald Blossom because you have an Essence Burst proc, say, and you get another stack of twin echoes, and then you can cast Echo twice, and your entire team will be echoed. And this echo generation on your team is essentially still the bread and butter of Evoker gameplay, where you want to echo your entire team, mostly, then go into Dream Breath, for example, so you apply the double Dream Breath, initial heal, but also hot, and nowadays also very much the healing from Merithra's Blessing, which just does a lot of healing if the target has previously taken damage. And now you can see a bit, I'm in the conundrum. Okay, I used my Tip the Scales. What do I do with it? I just sit on it now. Now I use it for the Empowered Dream Breath. I'm not super happy with this. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just a pet peeve of mine. It's not that bad really to just use it for an Empowered Fire Breath or also for an Empowered Dream Breath, to be fair. But somehow I feel like the tip the scales usage by the removal of Emerald Spirit Bloom feels way more clunky and unsatisfying than it did beforehand. But generally the gameplay feels a bit clunky on Evoker. Don't get me wrong, I really like the changes. I like the twin echoes and so on. It's a lot of fun, but Evoker always struggles at the start of each season from a lack of haste, and everything just takes forever, and casting Living Flames is just one of the worst feeling spells in the world, because it takes forever but it also doesn't do anything. Yet you can't really cast Disintegrate because you need the echo, you need the essence for casting your other essence abilities. Something is off, but it might change with improved gear and more haste. That's what I expect will be the case. Still, yeah, something is not quite right, to say it in terms of the Suramanians. Okay, yeah, we didn't talk much about the dungeon yet, but I just have a lot to say about Evoker, I guess. And there's not that much to talk about in the dungeon up to this point. It's relatively straightforward. Also the next segment, yeah, the Devouring Tyrants and so on, they will then, it will become a little bit more interesting. Also from the perspective of Evokers, some healing checks here, and generally in the entire season, are not super well suited to Evoker's kit, because in this season I feel that a lot of mechanics work with healing absorbs, like the Devouring Strike, I think, from the Tyrants it's called, but also in Nexus Point Zenith, the explosion from the first boss, from the boss in the left wing, and a lot of different ones which don't immediately come to mind. And healing absorbs that then apply ticking damage are tricky for Evokers, because the target will tick down and still have the healing absorb on them, but they will in absolute terms not have taken a ton of damage. And you rely on targets taking a ton of damage for your healing via your Golden Hour, and yeah, a reversion application. So one of your main spot healing tools, which is Echo Reversion, is hamstrung. As the target won't have taken a lot of damage yet, but they have a big healing absorb on them, your Golden Hour will heal for relatively little, and as a result you will not be able to clear the healing absorb before the target reaches low health. Very tricky situation for Evokers, I think, and in this, especially as in this season, it's quite prevalent. What you can do, of course, is Echo Verdant Embrace. It's a relatively strong spot heal to help in these situations. And Merithra's Blessing also does good single target healing by itself, but also, yeah, it also depends on the Golden Hour effect. So yeah, this is definitely a challenge for Evokers, and we will see it come into play a little bit on the Devouring Tyrants here in a moment. From the perspective of group healing, I think Evokers are in a pretty good spot, because the initial heal on your Dream Breath is really strong, especially if it's echoed. I would say it's a lay on hands for the group, but if the group is low and you have full value echoes on every player, and you cast a Dream Breath, even at level 1, their healing will be very substantial, probably like 60% of the HP or so. If I had to guess, maybe it's not correct, but it's a lot of healing in any event. Plus, the AoE healing from Merithra's Blessing is likewise extremely strong. And you have some damage reduction going around on all targets afflicted by your reversion as well, or affected by your reversion, I should say. It's not really an affliction, unless playing with an Evoker in a key is an affliction in and of itself, which some people might argue. I've already looked as well at the spec representations, and Evoker again is nearly absent. The class is cool, yeah. I'm doing first I'm going Druid with my guides, and then maybe I'll go Evoker next because it's complicated, it's interesting, I really like it. But yeah, it's a lot of work for not so much power, and then it's very clunky. And then you have situations like this one, where I mean the rewind was wasted because the AoE event was over. But I made a planning mistake here. I didn't. Maybe I didn't think he would cast another one of those AoE effects, or I just set it up incorrectly, and suddenly you are in a situation there's no button you can press. Yeah, as a druid, you use Convoke or Tranquility. Okay, fair enough, you have Rewind, very powerful. I've also seen people run the cooldown reduction on Rewind, which I think I've already said it, but yeah, that might be something interesting to look into, because really the reliance on Rewind is greater now than it was before, because previously you always had Spirit Bloom. Now here we have the situation, we have this Healing Absorb on the tank. Okay, we echo Verdant Embrace, and what do we do now? So it's the play is essentially echo Merithra's Blessing, and that will be enough probably, because we have a Merithra's Blessing proc as well. That's pretty potent. But yeah, since this is not real damage, it's damage that is sort of loaded into the back end with the Healing Absorb. The Golden Hour effect of Merithra's Blessing will be much lower. And it's enough here, because the Echo Verdant Embrace plus the Merithra's Blessing proc is quite powerful. But yeah, it's a tricky one. You don't have one of these abilities correctly available, and suddenly this looks a lot different. And here we have a situation where it looks a bit different. You have Time Dilation. I run only one charge. I've seen some players run 2 charges as well, which can help with this, of course. Time Dilation, very powerful spell, especially nowadays with the toolkit of Evokers, where you need to dilate time in order to be able to get through some situations. It would be pretty cool if you had a Time Dilation talent for the entire group. That could help also. That would make the spec even more complicated to play, surely. But yeah, that would maybe help in these group downtime situations. Maybe that if you press Time Dilation, it applies to all players who are affected by Echo. That probably wouldn't be a good idea, but yeah, somehow something that I might be missing. Yeah, now we are here at Gemellus. The boss doesn't really do a lot of things, but the main threat comes from the Devouring Sting, or however it's called, unless in this Astral Grasp every time someone dies. I don't know how that happens, but it's such a simple mechanic, but it does. But it's not that dangerous other than that. But this Cosmic Sting, that is a lot of damage. Not so much in this first phase of the fight, unless like the Warlock keeps standing in the puddle. But at the later point, where all of the adds are there, and every party member will be affected by the Cosmic Sting, and then it's a lot of group AoE damage. And obviously the arena here, and this is also one of the reasons probably why Evoker is underplayed. Yeah, this doesn't lend itself to smooth Evoker gameplay, right? The 40 yards Dream Breath with the huge cone helps, for sure. It's pretty good in terms of even covering the entire arena if you look at positioning a little bit. But your Temporal Anomaly is just not in a good spot then. Here is the big damage from all of the stings. And yeah, I should have used the defensive to start with and not just at the very end. That's something I complain about in other players. If they use defensives at 10% HP, they might as well not bother. But yeah, a little bit of cognitive dissonance can't hurt, I suppose. Yeah, so I can see why Evoker is not that well represented, but I have to say, in terms of the spot it's in, I like it a lot, especially considering I will get some additional gear, I will get more stats. I can imagine it will only get better as I get die here from aggro. It will only get better when I have more haste, because one of the main gripes I have with the class right now is just the lack of haste and applying echoes feeling so cumbersome. Okay, yeah, this pull is uneventful. It's one of sort of the some of the pulls where you as a healer can just relax. There's a little bit of kicking going on for the terror waves on the terrors. Don't know exactly what their name is. They're already dead. But other than that, you don't really have to do much here. You can just regenerate a bit of mana, perhaps, also deal some damage. And something I don't like so much about the changes made to Evoker and healers in general, I suppose, is that their damage dealing potential has been quite substantially pruned. That was always a marker of distinction in Evokers, I think, that was important for them to have, that they could deal substantial amounts of damage. It was already not that strong anymore in the previous seasons, but yeah, historically that has been a distinguishing factor. And yeah, I think Evoker needs something like that. Because what do you have as an Evoker? What is your advantage? Yeah, I don't see the advantage. So for example, on my Mistweaver Monk, the advantage is that I go into big pulls and I just press my spinning crane kick a million times, and it does so much healing that my Evoker could never do without going into higher dimensions and sort of making some calculations about the optimal sequences of spells. As a Druid, you have this raw healing power on some low cooldowns for your Convoke if something goes wrong. I'm not very good at vocalizing the advantages that individual classes have, but it feels like Evoker doesn't really have a distinct advantage. I've been recording too many of these segments, already getting a little bit of a sore throat. Anyway, we have a Devouring Tyrant again. And yeah, you're really a bit dependent also on the interplay that the tank will work with you here, and also time their defensive usage and their healing spells. At this point you can see I put a time dilation on him, and he bubbles, bit of a doubling. The bubble wasn't necessary based on the time dilation. It's not a problem though, because he is not going to need the bubble at the end boss, and we are only have the Void Caller remaining. Then again, we don't have enough percentage, so we still need to kill another Tyrant in a second here. Now you can see I panic pressed, or it wasn't really panic press, but I pressed rewind at the very end there, because the Pally again almost died. I think that was a sequencing mistake also. That's just what I do is reversion. And let me just go back one more time. So when does the Devouring Strike come out? It's a dangerous mechanic, really. I don't have my Verdant Embrace because I used it on the Hunter because he had a healing debuff that also deals damage. Now comes the strike on the tank. He took a big hit, so reversion, yeah, it's okay. It's acceptable. I don't have Mirithra's Blessing, unfortunately. So the correct sequencing here would be Echo. He already has an Echo. Dream Breath. Big initial heal on Dream Breath. Echo, Mirithra's Blessing. That I should have done. But I don't. I do Echo, Reversion. Actually, what am I doing here? I don't do Echo, Reversion. Okay, that explains. I do Echo, and then I apply another Echo, and then I apply another Echo. Yeah, okay. I should not have zoomed in on especially this section of the video. That was the worst play I could possibly have shown. I have no idea what I did there. Yeah, obviously then the rewind press was shameful, but necessary. Yeah, okay, so the correct play would have been Echo. He already had an Echo, so the first Echo was wasted. Then Dream Breath, not second Echo, and then another Echo. So the third Echo then perhaps was correct again, only that the first one was never consumed. And then yeah, Mirithra's Blessing, and he would have been gotten out of this situation quite well. We did manage to pull through it even with these mistakes. But yeah, you can also see here that also to illustrate the points made previously, as an Evoker, your ability to make mistakes and get away with it is severely restricted. Obviously, this was a really major mistake. So if as a Paladin you stand there and you spam 3 unempowered Flash of Lights, then that would be a comparable mistake, I suppose, and that also doesn't do anything. So yeah, but still, the point stands in and of itself. Now the end boss, also tricky for Evokers, because of the shape of the arena, so not so easy to hit all of your teammates with your temporal anomaly, meaning that you have to apply additional echoes. Team isn't stacked, the, to be fair, relatively moderate healing of Emerald Blossom also affects fewer targets, and yeah, generally a bit awkward. Dream Breath, again, most of the time will probably hit the entire party, which is favorable, but yeah, it's a little bit of a tricky one. Paladin is playing very well. He carries out the fragment before before he gets the debuff, so all I have to do is dispel. That's what I would like to see from all the tanks. Yeah. By the way, I run the talent where stasis is sort of a bit of a healing cooldown, in the sense that I'm not exactly sure what the talent is called, in the sense that it empowers the healing that you're going to be doing for the next 15 seconds. Higher healing over time effects, I think that's very useful. But the talent trees really are still in flux, I feel. So it doesn't seem to me, but I'm not super informed, that a real build has fully coalesced just yet. In terms of this fight, you can see, I'm not exactly sure how much mana I had when I started, I failed to look at it, but you can already see I'm running a bit low. So ideally I would find the time for disintegrates, but yeah, like I said, they compete with your essence abilities, and also there's a lot of damage going around, so there isn't really that much time to be spamming disintegrates for mana regeneration. I go back into stasis here. That's a poor usage of stasis, because I didn't have any spells ready to combine with the stasis. Now I have a stasis activated, waited 3 seconds, put a Dream Breath in it, Temporal Anomaly still wasn't ready, no Verdant Embrace in it, I don't think. Poor stasis usage, for sure. Generally, you want your Temporal Anomaly in it, you want a Dream Breath in it, and then usually a Verdant Embrace, I would say, stacked in it as well. But that's a bit, yeah, situationally dependent. I often use stasis as a re-application of my healing over time effects, so sometimes I also put the reversion in there as well, so Dream Breath, Dream Breath, Temporal Anomaly and reversion, so that I can just renew the reversions on the group. Yeah, something like that. So I still things to learn, things to figure out. I'm not super familiar yet with the optimal spell sequencing and so on Evoker just yet, but I'm very much looking forward into finding out and getting deeper into the spec after I'm done with my focus on Druids. Okay, I feel like I talked a lot. I feel like I have a lot to say about Evokers. You will be the judge of the extent to which the things I said were useful, as I get a huge upgrade on my head item slot, where I had a 204 head to 266. So that's something enjoyable here in the end. Thank you for watching this part of the video. Like the video if you enjoy this sort of commentary. Helps a lot with the algorithm and keeps me motivated in doing these kinds of videos, because as you can hear from my sore voice, they are taking their toll on my physical well-being. Thank you very much, and see you in the next segment, perhaps. Hello everyone, and welcome to this section of the video, which is the section on Holy Paladins, specifically Herald of the Sun Holy Paladins. There is a little bit of variation going on at the higher levels of play between Herald of the Sun and Lightsmith. I have not yet been looking into Lightsmith, so I do not think I have the competence to speak on the matter. However, I do want to share some thoughts on Herald of the Sun Holy Paladin, which I have been relatively harsh on in my previous video on the first impressions I have had with the healers in Season 1. Some of these concerns have alleviated due to the improved gear my Paladin has acquired. It seems to me as though the scaling of the class in terms of being able to deliver healing at lower item levels has been weaker than on most of my other classes. Except perhaps for Discipline Priest, which suffered from a similar problem and has now since then also improved in terms of the verdict I would give it. Even though both of the classes, I think, still aren't in a place where I would eventually like them to be, Paladin is getting a little bit of a remedy for this concern with the next reset. So on April 7th, their Word of Glory healing will be increased by 20%, which is not a ton to improve your overall throughput, I think. But since the ability is being used so frequently, so you cast it essentially all the time, that is, Eternal Flame is essentially the upgraded version of Word of Glory. So this one then will also be affected by this buff. In terms of playstyle, I really enjoy Holy Paladin. So essentially you're a cleave healer with very little potential for healing multiple targets at once. You do have Light of Dawn for doing so. Historically, the ability was never really used, and having pressed it a couple of times, having played Paladin so far, I also haven't found it particularly useful. So, but perhaps someone can offer some insight if in a Mythic Plus environment Light of Dawn is a button that you would ever want to press. So far I've been playing in such a way that I don't use it, but I use Eternal Flame instead, and especially in the Herald of the Sun version of Paladin, where Eternal Flame is upgraded, perhaps that is the way to go. In any event, you essentially only have single target spells to be using, and you will cleave with those single target spells onto the players affected by your beacons, as I run up here, because I thought we had forgotten to clear the camp, but we actually had cleared it. My bigwigs gives me a little bing whenever that happens, and I didn't remember hearing it, so I just went up again, but I probably just wasn't paying attention. Anyway, your healing cleaves onto the targets affected by your beacons, which is very satisfying, especially when you have a big healing spell going off. So, for example, the entire party is somewhat low, and then you cast a Holy Light on yourself, and all the beacon targets will also be healed up. When it comes to placing the beacons, I think it's generally good advice to have them on 2 DPS players, depending on whether or not the tank can handle himself really well. If the tank is able to soldier through encounters without taking any significant damage, then I think placing the beacons on the DPS players is the way to go. Obviously, you can also change the beacon placement depending on the damage profile of the encounter you are heading into. So if there is an encounter with significant tank damage, say the Berserkers in Mysara Caverns, which can hit the tank quite hard, then it might make sense to keep one of the beacons on the tank. And essentially you have 3 beacons to play with. The first 2 are the 2 Beacon of Lights, which you can just place and they will remain on the target for the remainder of the, or until you change their positioning. But you also have Beacon of the Savior from your Apex hero talents. And Beacon of the Savior sort of acts like a third beacon, but it changes targets every 8 seconds, I think it is, or when the target is at full health and there is another target which is not at full health to which the beacon could jump. And whenever the beacon does jump, you get the target previously affected by the beacon gets a 10% damage reduction and a small shield. So because of this 10% damage reduction, a core goal of playing Holy Paladin is then to make this beacon jump. Because whenever it does, you have this 10% damage reduction applied for, I think it's 8 seconds or something, but I'm not quite sure about the duration. And if you make it jump, it will go to the next player. If you heal this player up, then it will jump again to the next player. As you can see here, whenever they reach full health, the beacon of the savior jumps from one player to the next. And in doing so, in making the beacon jump, you can essentially apply a 10% damage reduction on perhaps not the entire party, but certainly to a significant portion of your party. And this can be very powerful, and it results in a bit of a whack-a-mole game where you heal up the party, but you should prioritize the target affected by your Beacon of the Savior for your healing, so that you can make it jump to the next player and sort of give this 10% damage buff. As we here make a somewhat larger pull, I remember dying in this pull. By the way, these debuffs which are going out here are roots or snares, so they slow players, and you can dispel them as they are magic effects, but you can also remove them with any freedom effect, and the players themselves could also remove them by any spells that dispel snares. And this can really help out with healing, because they do a substantial amount of damage, and if you have only one dispel, then the remaining debuff will continue to do damage. But as a paladin, you can just freedom one target and dispel the other, and sort of negate the danger of this mechanic. And here I remember, I think the tank took a lot of damage here, and I gave him my Blessing of Sacrifice. Yeah, here it is. Blessing of Sacrifice, which is always a somewhat dangerous proposition. I activate my defensive so as to not die myself, but you can see that I'm already dropping quite low. And now I additionally get this curse debuff, which sort of seals my fate here. And I have one chance now with the next global to bubble, but I cast a Holy Shock instead. Now I realize my fate is sealed, and I hammer the bubble, but it's too late as it's on the global cooldown and I cannot. So yeah, definitely a bit of call to caution when it comes to using Blessing of Sacrifice in situations where the tank is getting clobbered, because a significant portion of that damage will transfer onto you. So even with the defensive, I was in danger. They're obviously a little bit unlucky that I also got targeted with the curse at exactly this moment. But still, I should probably, in this situation, just have bubbled to begin with, because in that case, the Paladin will benefit from the damage reduction of Blessing of Sacrifice, but this damage will be redirected into my bubble and thereby be entirely negated, rather than another player actually taking this damage. So yeah, definitely a bit of a decision-making error here. These Dreadpulse Liches are a little bit dangerous as well. They essentially cast this Torrent of Misery, which deals some moderate damage to individual players. And then when they reach 50%, they begin pulsing. So it's a bit of a damage check in the end. You essentially want to burst them down after they have hit 50%, because at that point they will begin pulsing AoE damage onto the entire group until they are defeated. And this can produce some problems, especially when this pulsing damage is then paired with the Torrent of Misery, you can see here on the Monk. And then the Monk also has the Curse debuff, which is essentially a Healing Absorb that will deal damage until the Healing Absorb is removed. If you have a Curse dispel, you can just dispel it, but I don't. And so the damage from these three effects stacked on top of one another is very substantial. And I had to use Lay on Hands there on the Monk. And then we additionally also have the pulsing of the Dreadpulse Lich together with these kinds of debuffs. And sort of this puts me into a bit of a tricky spot from a decision-making perspective. Do I want to dispel the debuffs? It's very tricky here, right? I can dispel it. That will remove the damage the hunter will take going forward, but it will not heal them immediately. The Paladin, it would be a bit more of a safer dispel, but for the hunter it's pretty tricky. I can decide I heal them now, or I dispel, and sort of must make a decision on what will be less likely to kill them, because even if I dispel, they might take an additional tick, and they will take an additional tick from the Dreadpool's Lich pulsing. Probably the dispel would have been the way to go, as the Dreadpool's Lich is almost dead. But yeah, or perhaps probably the way to go would have been to hardcast a Holy Light here, because Holy Light heals so much, it will onto the Hunter, it will also cleave onto the Paladin, and that probably would have solved the situation. So in situations where a ton of healing is needed, Holy Light is often a good spell to be using to heal up targets which are dropping low, because your overall cleave rotation from your infusion procs and from Eternal Flame and Holy Shock, while being very satisfying and delivering some good healing, is sometimes not enough to power through some real damage spikes going on. Yeah, so definitely an area to optimize as a Holy Paladin is the correct usage and the, the well thought through usage of Holy Light. Because using it costs a ton of mana, and if you overuse it, you run very frequently. However, if you never use it and try to make do with your base rotation, then you are missing out on a ton of healing potential that Holy Light does have to offer. And essentially you don't need any mana as a Paladin unless you use Holy Light. So here, for example, you can see the Holy Light absolutely eats this debuff for breakfast, whereas I would have needed to use multiple spells here to get myself healed up. But I decide, okay, there's a huge healing absorb on myself, there's no mana problems at all. Using Holy Light here tops me. It's essentially a lay on hands. So that's how powerful the spell is, or can be. And I think one of the core areas of skill expression for Holy Paladin in this season then is to manage your mana in such a way that Holy Light is used sufficiently often in terms of for generating maximum throughput, and at the same time not overusing it to put yourself in a pinch from a mana situation. And I think the class is also tuned in such a way that usage of Holy Light is intended to be sometimes required. I feel that especially in rot encounters, when you get somewhat unlucky with your infusion of light procs, then it can happen that that you need to use Holy Light instead, because otherwise your healing throughput will not be sufficient. Here again we have a Dreadpool's Lich, but this one is much less dangerous because we essentially don't have any other damage going on. In the previous pack where this happened, we also somewhat overpulled, so it was a very dangerous pull to start with. And the Dreadpool's Lich by himself is just a minor AoE problem to be solved, although we also have the curse here, it seems like, which again, clearing it with a well-timed Holy Light is a very strong response that Paladins have for doing so. Generally speaking, infusion of light procs, which essentially you can see proccing here right next to the character with the proc indicators, are quite powerful because they greatly empower your flash of light and make it instant cast, and usually you want to consume those for making instant cast flash of lights, which heal for an absolute ton of healing, and you have a chance to get an infusion of light proc every time that you cast Holy Shock. So one of the core gameplay mechanics essentially as a Holy Paladin is to cast Holy Shock a lot, essentially on cooldown, fishing for these infusion of light procs and then consuming them to heal up players. And yeah, then the cycle essentially starts anew. So lots of Holy Shocks and lots of flash of lights for the consumption of the infusion of light procs. And here for encounters like this, you can see me absolutely playing this game of whack-a-mole. And I also activate my Aura Mastery, I think. So many of the players here in this group, because we make the Beacon of the Savior jump from one target to another, many of them will have a 10% damage reduction. Now we use Aura Mastery for another additional 9% over my Devotion Aura in damage reduction. And you can see that the Cryo Stomp, which would usually deal a lot of damage, really doesn't deal so much damage. And perhaps only the Hunter here didn't have it on them. The additional damage reduction from Beacon of the Savior, that is. I also took a bit more damage, but that's probably due to item level rather than a lack of damage reduction, because my Paladin is still at a low 250s or something, I think, now. Yeah, so definitely still also some upward potential in terms of gearing, but up to this point I've already found that the additional gear on my Paladin has helped more than it has on some other characters. As we drop low a bit and I go decide a Holy Light is in order. It's also somewhat awkward, this encounter. Here I use my wings because because I didn't have any infusion of light procs to work with. And I was a bit in an awkward spot because these rocks that he is throwing down actually pose a line of sight restriction. And it can happen here. I think it happened on the Monk there for a second. That you want to heal someone, but they are not in line of sight. So positioning yourself in such a way that everyone is within your vision range is very important, but it's also very difficult because players are so small and the boss is so big. And additionally, he's complaining a lot about saving snacks for later, which is also somewhat distracting. And so it's not always so easy to be able to monitor where exactly your teammates are, and then you sometimes get into a situation where you try to heal and you cannot, and if that happens a couple of times in a row, then you are suddenly in a sticky wicket. When it comes to casting Holy Lights in these AoE encounters, I would recommend casting it on a target not affected by your beacons, because in that way you make sure that Holy Light cleaves onto the other targets which are affected by your beacons for some additional throughput that is being spread out over multiple targets rather than just healing the target who is being targeted by the Flash of Light. Now this encounter is very easy essentially. There's only one segment of the fight where some significant damage is coming in, and that is this first one. Every time that the chasing fixation phase resets, they will go into the burst AoE phase, or whatever, the phase where an AoE debuff is going out, which is ticking for a moderate to high amount of damage and needs to be healed through. So this is where your cooldowns go essentially. As a healer in this fight is every time that this phase reset happens. And during this phase of the fight, essentially nothing is happening from a healer's perspective. Yes, there is a bit to heal with these poison explosions, but for the most part, you don't really have to heal a lot. So you can focus a bit more on dealing damage. Obviously making sure that when the fixation lands on you, you move away from the boss. As a melee healer, that is requires a little bit more attention. Now it's on me, but yeah, this mechanic, it really, I think with this boss, you really realize that this is a Wrath of the Lich King encounter, because from a modern perspective, these mechanics and also the damage throughput of the boss seem insufficient. And here we have the phase again where the damage is coming in after the reset, after the fixation phase. Use your defensives here, use healing cooldowns if necessary, but usually at least at the lower key levels they won't really be necessary. Generally I think Pit of Saron is the easiest dungeon in this season from my experience. It's always a little bit difficult to anticipate the difficulty of a dungeon at the highest key levels, because mechanics that aren't that threatening suddenly become very threatening. So for example, think of the second boss in Magister's Terrace, who puts out the, I don't know what, the glaive throwing thing, where you need to move into the suppression zone afterwards, and that deals some damage. And on the lower key levels, it's really a pretty easy boss, because it doesn't do anything other than that. But the higher you migrate in the key levels, the more dangerous the ticking damage becomes of the glaives, and then subsequently also the explosion from moving into the suppression zone. And I could see that this becomes an extremely challenging encounter to heal through as a healer when the key level is sufficiently high. That being said, I haven't played the Magister's Terrace at a super high key level. I think I've only played it at plus 12. Generally, I've played all of my healers at plus 12 and some plus 13s, some plus 14s. But at least I'm still a little bit hamstrung by the low gear on my character, so these key levels might feel a little bit more difficult than they actually are. Now we move up to the end boss area. Here you need to be a little bit careful of the Frostbane slash that goes out on the tank. But generally these trash mobs are pretty easy to deal with. One more thing to mention, which I have found my own Paladin gameplay to be lacking in, and also found that it has improved significantly since I have started applying this general rule of thumb more diligently, but still not to the extent that I would like to, is using Divine Toll on cooldown. That being said, I'm not using it now. Let's check. Okay, now I use it. So I try, because it's only a 30-second cooldown, but it gives you Dawnlight and it gives you full Holy Power. It gives you one free cast of Holy Power Spender. So it's an extremely powerful button, but the cooldown is very low. And underusing it is one of the biggest mistakes you can probably make as a Holy Paladin, because you leave so much efficiency and healing power on the table by treating it as a cooldown. And I think one of the challenges, and from a game design perspective, I'm also not super happy with it, one of the challenges in its use is that if you are aiming to be an efficient player, then using it at like 3 Holy Power, if you have 3 Holy Power or you have 2 Holy Power, feels wrong, because it gives you 5 Holy Power. So you want to use it when you don't have any Holy Power, in order to maximize the amount of Holy Power that you gain through using it. However, that's probably not the way to go here, I think. I think using it on cooldown, even if you are at high Holy Power, is the way to go. Yes, maybe you can put one spender in so that you drop from, let's say, 5 to 2, but I don't think it's ever really justified to say, okay, now I'm at 2, let me just make one additional Holy Shock, one more Eternal Flame, then I'll be at 0, then I will use my Divine Toll. These kinds of situations, I think, lead to underusage of Divine Toll, and I think that's not a good thing. I think, you need to forsake a little bit of Holy Power efficiency in favor of of high usage of Divine Toll. So using it on cooldown, essentially, in my book, for now, takes precedence over using it efficiently in terms of its ability to generate Holy Power. And from a game design perspective, that's a little bit frustrating for me. I just don't like it as much, because you are essentially forced to use the ability somewhat suboptimally, simply because you are in situations where it's ready and your Holy Power isn't at 0. But I don't think there's any way around it. Maybe someone of you who is playing Paladin has some insights on that. How do you use Divine Toll? I'd be interested if you agree with this assessment that it should be used on cooldown, or if you rather think that it should be used for maximum efficiency. Anyway, we are nearing the end of the dungeon here with the Glacial Guard. Generally, this was a key that was very clean, small pulls, but Yeah, just a safe way of playing the dungeon, which I think is totally fine. You definitely can pull larger here. We had some large pulls, but especially in the first area of the dungeon, we played it very safely. But we do make it through in the end, and the key is timed, so yeah, there's no shame in playing keys safely. Here the end boss is moderately challenging, with the potential to become extremely challenging if a mistake is made. Then again, these mechanics, so long as they are known, are very, very easy. So it's not difficult for players to sort of move onto the corrupted piles of bones or whatever those are. And from a healing perspective, yeah, definitely not an unchallenging encounter when the army of the dead is spawning. So in this first phase, you essentially need to do a little bit of spot healing on the 2 targets affected by the debuff. Here you can see it has the same symbol as the debuff throughout the dungeon, but this one cannot be dispelled, and it can also not be removed by a movement impairing effect removal. Yeah, but so you just have to heal through it. And here we have the Army of the Dead spawning, and then this one mob in the Army of the Dead, until he is defeated, pulses some AoE damage. This is where your healing cooldowns go, so if you need it, you can use your wings here. Generally I like to hold on, because the wings are so powerful, because they give you 2 instant cast Holy Lights. I like to hold my wings. I'm not quite sure if that's the correct way of playing 2, because yeah, wings are obviously also something that provides a ton of efficiency, but I like to hold them a little bit like I do rewind on my Evoker. It's not necessarily correct, I don't think, but if you don't have wings available and you come into a situation that's very, very difficult to deal with, and you don't have these 2 instant cast Holy Lights, then you might end up in a real pinch. So for now, I am underusing my wings for sure, at the behest of safety. But yeah, the more familiar you get with the dungeons, and also with how your group is pulling and so on, and the more trust you have in the fact that no really dangerous situations will arise out of nothing, the more freely you can start using your wings as well. Now I should probably just use them, because we are about to clear the dungeon anyway, so it doesn't really matter to look at efficiency, and I do use them. And yeah, this power spike from the 2 instant cast Holy Lights is really crazy, and it goes to show also, to conclude with, the power of Holy Light as a spell in itself, because yeah, it's instant cast, but you could also cast it and it would still deal a similar amount of healing. So yeah, Paladin, very interesting class to play. I like this weaving of Holy Light with the base rotation, and sort of having an eye on mana when doing so. It's definitely a class that I still need to look into a little bit more deeply, and I'm looking forward to that very much. If you have any feedback on Holy Paladin, please let me know. And other than that, thanks for watching this segment, and see you soon. Hello everyone, and welcome to this segment of the video, which is the final segment on my Oracle Discipline Priest. If you have watched my previous video on my early impressions with the classes in Season 1, you will have noticed that I was very harsh on Discipline Priest. And these concerns have somewhat alleviated over the last week as my priest acquired additional gear. Now the spec is not quite as poorly off as I had previously thought it was. It seems like the scaling of Discipline Priest with item level works more strongly than it does on some of the other classes. So with my Holy Priest, for example, I didn't have any issues at all. Healing plus 10 keys at to 40 item level, whereas on my Discipline Priest this felt relatively challenging. Now my Priest is at around 260, and it seems like Discipline Priest has somewhat caught up with my Holy Priest and with my other healers. And from what I've read in the comments, this might be a sort of development that could continue at even higher item levels. in which case Discipline Priest may not be as poorly off as I had previously portrayed. That being said, my expertise on the spec in this season is not as well developed yet. I have only played a very handful of keys because I play all the classes, and I really need to sort of manage my time in doing so, and I haven't been getting around to Discipline Priest as much as I would have liked to. And perhaps that's a little bit due to the clunkiness with which it plays. And this clunkiness, what I mean by that is the centralization of gameplay around Shadow Word Pain. Because Shadow Word Pain now gives you a chance whenever Shadow Word Pain deals damage to trigger Power of the Dark Side, so your enhanced Penance cast, which is important and relatively substantially empowers your Penance. So it does make sense to have a lot of Shadow Word Pain on the enemy targets. At the same time, Shadow Word Pain damage gives you a chance to proc Shadowmend, so another reason to have a lot of Shadow Word Pains on your targets, which is good. I don't mind that. I think Discipline Priest has always centered around doing something with the enemies in order to do something with the allies. But I think the talent tree currently is very awkward. From what I've seen, many of the top players play different talent builds. You could argue that's a good thing. At the end of the day, I would even agree with that there's not one talent build and everybody plays it, because what's the point of all the choice if no one is exercising that choice? But I think the trade-offs in Discipline Priest's talent tree at the moment are not very fun. So essentially, what would make this spec really flow for me is picking up Encroaching Shadows and Power of Revel in the Darkness, for being able to very easily spread my Shadow Word Pain to multiple enemy targets by targeting the target affected by Shadow Word Pain with Penance, spreading it to 2 additional targets. That's what I want to do, and that's not what has been done here, because like I said, I haven't found the time to play so much on my Discipline Priest, but that is also what I will do. Irrespective of the absolute power that this will yield, I find this application, one-by-one application of Shadow Word Pain to multiple targets to be tedious, and I am willing to sacrifice some power if that should be the case, in order to more easily apply Shadow Word Pain to multiple targets. Going forward, I will definitely pick up Encroaching Shadows and Revel in the Darkness, so that I can spread Shadow Word Pain on pull. So just pull the pack, apply Shadow Word Pain, double cast Penance, unless there's a shit ton of damage going out, in which case, okay, gotta heal the tank maybe. But other than that, apply Shadow Word Pain to the entire group, giving me a lot of chance for Shadowmend procs as well as Power of the Dark Side procs. And just making the gameplay a whole lot more enjoyable. And I see that some of the good high-ranking priests are also playing it like this. But it does come at a cost. Usually talents which are lost are the longer duration of Shadow Word Pain, which of course is then also a trade-off. Then you have to do the spreading more frequently and so on, as well as the relatively substantial damage reduction of Shadow Word Pain, which will obviously also be reflected in your healing, it's a bit painful to give up this talent, but I think that I will. Talking about the dungeon, we are now moving on to Ember Dawn, the Dragonhawk boss, which I find that at the relatively higher key levels is one of the more challenging bosses to heal, especially if you don't have Bloodlust, which we do not. Simply because the intermission phase deals a lot of damage, requires a lot of movement, requires a lot of paying attention also. It's generally a good idea, I think, to keep multiple penances ready. I haven't really done that here, but ideally I would want to go into this phase with 2 penances at my disposal, so that I can cast easily while moving, and sort of get through these flaming updraft phases where individual players are being targeted by the tornadoes without using any of my core healing spells or even cooldowns. Then again, I wouldn't really say it's superior to not use any penances here. I think that would also be too restrictive. But ideally, I would like to see myself go into the the Burning Gale phase with 2 penances active. Saying that, I don't have 1, and I think that's a bit of a mistake. You can see the group is dropping quite low. Probably just also suboptimal gameplay, as I find the time to cast Shadowmend, which does an absolute boatload of healing, which is good, but obviously also only to 1 target. I don't know if there was also some failure damage in there, but anyway, that was too close for comfort. So I'm still learning on my Discipline Priest on the optimal sequences of spells and how to get through these phases effectively. Obviously, if you get lucky with a Void Shield proc, then it will become a lot easier. Also, one thing that I don't enjoy that much about Discipline Priest right now is the perceived randomness in the proccing of Void Shield from your Penance Bolts. I would like to have a little bit of a more deterministic approach to applying Void Shields rather than sort of just hoping for procs. I think the problem is worse than it is on some other classes like Holy Paladin with Infusion of Light procs and Priests in general with Surge of Light procs, because those do seem to be coming more frequently. I think the Void Shield procs are sometimes far and in between. So yeah, as you can see here, I get 2 in a row, which is cool. But then sometimes you don't get any, and I just think this is a little bit too much variance for my taste. But that being said, again, I still need to really take an in-depth look at the talent tree of Discipline Priests and see if there are any solutions to make that whole playstyle feel somewhat more satisfying. Overall, I'm pretty happy here that we don't do the largest pulls, because I think, as Discipline Priest is a healer that really needs to plan out its healing, that really thrives on doing consistent healing that is well thought through in its delivery. Huge chaotic pulls, if you are not super familiar with the class and not super potent on the class, are probably among the most dangerous out of all the healers. Because you really don't, that's also what I said in my last video, you really don't have any good solutions. One commenter under my last video said that evangelism is a solution. When I read the comment, I didn't agree with that at all, because at my low item level, evangelism didn't do anything. The Radiance casts felt so underwhelming that nothing was happening. But this too is starting to come together at a higher item level, I will say. I now agree more with this statement that Radiance actually does feel like a relatively potent, Evangelism actually does feel like a relatively potent cooldown if paired with a subsequently cast Radiance, which then does a relatively sizable amount of healing. But this is also really your only one if you're really in Sticky Wicket. You can of course use Ultimate Penitence, but very clunky spell to use, very slow in its delivery of healing. It's on a cast time, so has additional restrictions in terms of not having to move in the moment that you cast it. I mean, you get a big shield, of course, you get it through beforehand, but you can't always just use it. You need to stand still. And even if you do get it through, its healing is okay-ish, but not great, and also the delivery of its healing is strongly delayed, meaning that a target which is dying will probably do so. before that the healing takes effect. So in this area of the dungeon, especially as a priest, I think it's very important to be interrupting the poison blades, because you don't have a poison dispel, and from my experience those hit really hard. So if tank and DPS fail on interrupting those, be prepared to apply pain suppression, especially to the tank. If he has multiple stacks of the poison blade, this becomes very dangerous. Doesn't help that they are immune to fear, which is sort of your only way to stop them as a disciplined priest. But yeah, you just have to essentially just trust that your DPS and tank will do the job. For this boss, I think the healing profile of disciplined priests is quite well suited, because there's a lot of this sort of rot damage going on from the splattering spew, and you just need to have a little bit of a strategy in place. Okay, splattering spew goes through, I will immediately Shadow at Death, and this will negate most of the damage that has been coming in. A bit unfortunate, of course, that you don't have a Curse Dispel here. Not that the Curse of Darkness, or however it's called, would be particularly dangerous, but it's just a little bit of extra movement that's required. Another disadvantage that priests have on this encounter is the slow movement speed. So as a priest, you really need to be a bit more on top of your game with the debilitating Shriek, which is coming up, in order to be able to get behind the Banshee when she is casting, because it will be very difficult if you miss the first hook to get to the second one. Also, not helped by the fact that disciplined priests, while delivering strong, consistent healing, have limited options for kicking their healing into extremely high gear. So on some other classes, you have some cooldowns available which you can press to really make your healing that much more impactful and powerful for the next 20 or 30 seconds or so. And as a disciplined priest, it feels like you don't really have that. You can pain suppression for sort of a pseudo healing increase at the hands of damage reduction, but then again that's only one target. So if it's a group-wide AoE damage, then this doesn't really help so much. So yeah, I find it difficult to see how, as a disciplined priest, I would get through multiple missed hooks from the monstrosity, as I don't really have any buttons I can press. I can press Evangelism to sort of help me get through that if I hadn't used it beforehand, but Evangelism then also is a button that you sort of want to press for efficiency. If you are holding Evangelism for the entire dungeon waiting for something to go terribly wrong, you're probably using the ability incorrectly, I would say, because it's just on a too low of a cooldown with too much promised efficiency gains from the instant cast Radiances, that it would make sense to just sit on it for the entire dungeon. In which case you are really left only with Ultimate Penitence, which is, from a healing perspective, certainly not overwhelming. Perhaps it's just whelming. As we proceed here through the dungeon with these packs of trash, really only thing you need to watch out for here is the Interrupting Screech. Don't get spell locked from it. Its damage is moderate, especially considering that there's not really any other damage going on in the pool. So yeah, it's definitely some area of the dungeon where you can really relax, especially compared with some of the other areas with all the poison going on, especially for priests. Poison a little bit difficult to handle. So definitely a point where you can just focus a bit on dealing damage, which is also areas where, of course, the Encroaching Shadows and Revel in the Darkness talents for spreading Shadowward Pain would come in handy in sort of making the damage dealing a little bit less cumbersome. But perhaps that's primarily also me. I've never really enjoyed the manual spreading of damage over time effects. For the longest part of my career, if you want to call it that, in World of Warcraft, and I've been playing since Classic launched, I have usually played DPS, lots of Fury Warrior, but most of the classes I have played, except for Hunter, I haven't ever really played. But yeah, I've only switched to healer in Dragonflight for PvP. And yeah, essentially because of Solo Shuffle, I think it's a great format, as I never really had a PvP team, certainly not one where I felt like pushing together would make a lot of sense. Except for in Mist of Pandaria, I think there was some time where I really enjoyed playing PvP with also some very competent teammates. So Solo Shuffle came at the right time, and this is where I switched to healer, and then since then, yeah, and now especially with the YouTube channel and so on, I really enjoy healing and the challenges it poses, and sort of made the switch from that point. But yeah, to come full circle on why I'm even telling you this, even as my time as a DPS, I never really enjoyed when classes were in a state where dots had to be spread manually. So I played Shadow Priest a lot. As I die here from the tank hit from the Loyal Wargs, this is a difficult situation to handle. I go into my Evangelism, and there you can see it actually does some decent healing. And then immediately go into Ultimate Penitence, hoping to solve this situation with that. Luckily we do get a Void Shield proc, which helps out here a lot in this situation. Now you also have to find the time, if you don't have the spreading talent for Shadowed Pain, putting it out on an individual target, Shadowed Pain, and then consuming it with Shadowed Death. I think that's very important to be mindful of, that you don't just Shadowed Death, but you actually have a Shadowed Pain applied beforehand to be able to consume it, which significantly enhances the healing of Shadowed Death then. Yeah, challenging pull, especially with my own death happening at the beginning there, because yeah, the Warg had aggro on me and gave me the tank hit. My gear is yellow, so I should have repaired beforehand, which is sort of in the back of my mind, because I'm also not that comfortable on my Discipline Priest yet. I'm like, I might die again. That's not extremely unlikely at this point. But yeah, I don't think that I do. Anyway, I think, yeah, Shadow Priest has been in this situation beforehand where you had to spread dots manually, and also Affliction Locks have had that. I'm not exactly sure how those classes are set up now, but generally I don't really like that, because it also requires a lot of optimization of the nameplates, and I'm having trouble right now optimizing my nameplates to actually be stacking on top of each other and not being sort of a mix of nameplates in front and behind of each other. But my plater stacking nameplates thing doesn't really seem to do the job. It's not really that important as a healer, except for when you play Shaman, where you really need to be able to mouse over kick. And if the nameplates are somewhat awkwardly stacked on top of each other, then that's a bit more difficult. But given the removal of kicks on all of the healers, it's not that much of a problem at the end of the day. This boss here does take this boss here does take some getting used to, in the sense that his jump deals quite a bit of damage on 2 targets, so it's a bit of a cleave healing situation for 2 targets, and it also requires a lot of moving around and watching ground puddles, so it's really a relatively taxing mechanic on the healer, because the damage is quite substantial, and at the same time the requirement on your movement is likewise rather substantial. And yeah, I realized the first time I did this here in this fight, I didn't do a good job, so the mage dropped very low. It wasn't that dangerous, because it was evident that, yeah, he's dropping low, but he's not going to die, because there's not any damage coming up afterwards. But ideally I want to, yeah, sort of prepare myself better for the second time, and especially with the 2 Shadowman procs that I have had, I have managed to do that. And you essentially want to spot heal these players up relatively quickly, certainly before the Rallying Bellow goes out, because that is a relatively substantial AoE group hit. And if you haven't topped the targets beforehand, here it comes. Yeah, a little bit close. So actually I should develop a solution for that, and the solution, yeah, there's not much of development to be done, I guess. The solution should be pain suppression, in that case, probably, but also perhaps timing for the use of evangelism to as if ever the rallying bellow happens at a point where the targets are still low, so that you can top them up relatively quickly. So I think that's the main point of danger in this fight, is if after the Reckless Leap the rallying bellow goes off and you haven't healed the targets back up. Then again, you also want to be able to rely somewhat on your teammates using their defensives at that time. Because yeah, it's not you can solve most of the things as the healer, but it obviously always helps if DPS are also thinking about their role in the dungeon and using defensives. And obviously the higher you get, even when playing with pugs in terms of key levels, the better this defensive usage will become. Although at the moderately high key levels, like say at the moment like 13 or so, don't expect DPS to be using defensives appropriately. There will be some who do, and there will be some who don't, because at the end of the day, if you play a lot, and even if you're not such a good player and not really paying that much attention, you will get healers who can handle it, even if you don't use defensives, if that handling is possible. And then if you play a lot, you will still time a lot of keys, have a good score, and be in these keys. But yeah, always nice when DPS players actually do think about it and use their defensives. This boss as well is quite challenging to heal in my opinion. I'm not really sure exactly on the strategy just yet. I think the intended mechanic here is that the debuff from the arrows is actually being cleared. So she will put out these debuffs on players via the arrow rain, and it deals a ton of damage, and I actually, especially on my Discipline Priest, have a little bit of trouble healing through it. So for this fight anyway, my strategy is to just at least clear my debuff immediately. But usually what I have found is that nobody else is ever clearing their debuff. I think that's probably a mistake. I think the intended mechanic is that players do find the time to clear their debuffs. Yeah, anyway, it's much easier to heal if one or two players actually do remove their debuffs, rather than having to heal through this damage for the entire duration, especially if your proficiency on the class is not exactly where you would like it to be. But also from a throughput perspective here, I'm just having some trouble. Certainly I'm not making the claim that I'm playing optimally, but we are dropping low. I'm holding my Ultimate Penitence. That's obviously something that I could still use. Maybe I've also underused my Shadow Word Death, or used it when no Shadow Word Pain was applied. I haven't really been paying attention that much to it, but that could also contribute to this problem we seem to be having. But yeah, that's still something on Discipline Priest where I see my other healers don't struggle as much from a throughput perspective. And yes, that's probably a bit of a skill issue, but at the same time, I'm not the best on all of the other healers either, so I try to be as good as I can. And then if it is a skill issue, that would suggest that it is more difficult to be high skilled on Discipline Priest than it is on other healers then. In any event, I hope you enjoyed this segment on Discipline Priest. Even though I haven't played the class that much, I just want to offer some of my thoughts on it. Very happy to hear your thoughts on it as well, and how you have fared, and how, if you play multiple healers, how you think Discipline Priest compares to these other healers. Thank you for watching this segment of the video, this last segment of the video, and yeah, thank you. Okay, that does it. That was the video. Thank you very much for watching. If you're still here, please consider liking the video and also subscribing if you have enjoyed it. It really helps me out a lot and makes sure that you don't miss any of those future uploads in the future. If you have any comments on my commentary in the sense of where you would want it to migrate towards, or maybe focusing more on the dungeons or more on some certain aspects of the classes, please leave it as a comment, and I will see if I can make my future commentary cater to your expectations more effectively. At the end of the day, my intention is to serve you as the audience, and I want you to get the most from these commentary style videos, so your feedback is highly valued. That being said, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will hope to see you soon.